The workday was finally over, and it was time to close up. She was completely exhausted after the long day, having worked non-stop without even taking a lunch break. Myunghyun was surprised to see that Hayeon was still at work. They had been working side by side all day without a break, yet Hayeon still looked flawless. Hayeon smiled and thanked her for the compliment. Even though she was worn out, she couldn't allow herself to look unpresentable. Myunghyun knew perfectly well that this time would be just like all the others. Had Hayeon really decided to drive herself into the ground again? Hayeon was struggling and completely drained. If she kept pushing herself like this, she wouldn't last much longer. That crazy girl had been obsessively working on the display window for several days straight, and she desperately needed some time to rest. Hayeon thought Myunghyun Unni was exaggerating this time. Myunghyun asked where she was going and whether she had plans to meet someone. Hayeon said it was time for her to leave. Myunghyun agreed and promised to take care of everything herself. It was Valentine's Day, and maybe Hayeon wanted to meet her boyfriend Jaeol. Jaeol was currently in Busan, so they couldn't meet. Myunghyun was surprised. It really didn't seem like they were a couple. Hayeon spent more time with her than with her own boyfriend. Hayeon believed that once he came back, everything would go back to normal. You can believe whatever you want, but last year was exactly the same. She really should hurry, or she'd be late. Hayeon said goodbye to Umi, planning to have a nice evening, even if she'd be spending it alone. On the way, she decided to text her boyfriend Jaeon, asking what the weather was like in Busan, since snow had been forecast where she was. Quite some time passed, but he didn't reply, not even opening the message. He must be really busy, Hayeon thought, as she approached the concert hall. A huge banner advertising the famous singer hung at the entrance, and she was happy she'd managed to get tickets and could attend the concert. She knew the concert would be amazing, and he would definitely be upset if he found out she was there alone. But there was nothing she could do. The situation was what it was. She couldn't miss this event. She had dreamed of hearing this singer live for so long. Cha Jae-il believed his work was more important than dates. He saw no point in wasting his precious time on them. They had been together for a year and a half, yet Hayeon still felt lonely. The higher the expectations, the deeper the disappointment. Still, she needed to stay positive. She was already at the concert, after all. When she entered the hall, she needed to find the seats listed on her tickets. When she finally found them, she noticed a man sitting in Jaeho's seat. Was there some kind of mistake, she wondered, heading over to sort it out. She immediately realized the man was there alone, so she hoped she'd be able to enjoy the concert peacefully. She approached him and apologized, but when he turned around, she was pleasantly surprised. She hadn't expected a surprise like this, especially not seeing this guy sitting in her fiancé's seat. Jinhan oppa. How had he ended up in that exact spot? He recognized Hayeon too, and was genuinely happy to see her. He tried to remember the last time they'd met, and realized it had been a long time. She had changed so much since then. Hayeon greeted Jinhan. Had he come here because of Hayeon's invitation as well? That turned out to be true, and he asked why she was at the concert alone. Hayeon replied that even on a day like this, her boyfriend was swamped with work. There was nothing she could do about it. She had to accept that things turned out this way and that she'd be spending the holiday alone. She wanted to ask him the same thing, why he was alone too. Jinhan was currently single and not seeing anyone. Life had worked out in a way that he still hadn't found a partner. The last thing Hayeon had heard about Jinhan was that he had broken off 2 engagements, but no one ever talked about the reasons behind it. Jinhan was glad to see Hayeon. He could spend the evening in her company and enjoy the concert together with her. Hayeon didn't mind having him next to her, but she still felt lonely because her boyfriend wasn't there with her. They hadn't talked in a long time, so for a while, they didn't even know what to say, leaving a heavy silence between them. Since the concert was about to start, he suggested they sit back comfortably and enjoy the singer's performance. Even though she didn't know what to say to Jinhan, she kept glancing his way. She noticed he looked more mature, no longer the teenager she remembered. Judging by his expression, he felt awkward. It was obvious he was a little nervous and afraid to look back at her. According to the tickets, the concert would last almost 2 hours, so they needed to get into a positive mindset. They turned toward each other at the same time, their eyes meeting. For both of them, it was an awkward moment that made their hearts race. Jinhan quickly looked away, but Hayeon kept watching him and noticed the warm, sweet scent of fig lingering around him. She thought to herself how glad she was to have run into Jinhan. He, on the other hand, didn't seem surprised by their meeting at all. Once again, that uncomfortable silence settled between them. She could sense his scent everywhere. Sitting so close to him, Hayeon realized she was starting to feel strangely nervous, her heart beating faster. They were sitting very close, so from time to time their shoulders brushed, both pretending not to notice. Then Hayeon apologized for touching him again, feeling awkward that she might be disturbing his comfort. Jinhan thought she was nudging him because he had been talking too much and distracting her from the concert. But that wasn't the case. Hayeon saw something she couldn't have imagined even in her worst nightmare. And she couldn't believe her eyes. A few rows ahead, she spotted her boyfriend, Cha Jaeol, sitting with another girl. At first, she thought she must have mistaken him for someone else. Around his neck was a scarf just like the one she had recently given him. She decided she needed to call him immediately, to convince herself she was wrong and that she was worrying for nothing. That couldn't be possible. Why would he be here if he was supposed to be in Busan? And that scarf wasn't one of a kind, so Hayeon still hoped she was just mistaken. Jinhan Oppa noticed that Hayeon had been gone for almost 10 minutes, and he was starting to worry. He remembered her saying she'd step out for just a minute and come right back, yet she had been gone far too long. Maybe something had happened, or maybe she'd changed her mind about the concert. But that didn't make sense, since she'd left all her belongings next to him. He picked up her coat and purse and decided to go look for Hayeon. He needed to know what had happened, and whether she might need his help. In the crowd, he spotted a girl rushing toward the exit of the concert hall. He immediately went after her. It was obvious she was running away. It was winter outside, bitterly cold. Hayeon stood in the middle of the street in a light dress, shivering from the cold. Jinhan draped his coat over her shoulders and asked what had happened and why she was in such a state. Hayeon couldn't explain anything. She wasn't even sure she'd really seen her boyfriend with another girl. So she said nothing serious had happened, that she must have imagined it. Jinhan didn't believe her explanation. He sensed that something truly serious and painful had happened to her. Hayeon didn't want him to understand how bad she felt, so she pretended everything was fine. She'd just changed her mind and decided to go home. He didn't want to pressure her or interrogate her, so he chose to wait. Eventually, she'd open up on her own. Once again, she noticed a stranger who looked just like her boyfriend passing nearby. When he turned around, Hayeon had no doubts left. It was Cha Jaeol. She stood there, watching him walk away, her legs giving out as nausea hit her, realizing how shamelessly he had deceived her. Hayeon slowly collapsed against Jinhan, and without understanding what was going on, he simply tried to keep her on her feet. He immediately noticed how intently she was staring at that man and asked whether she knew him, whether there was something between them. Hayeon decided to leave. She apologized to Oppa and said she'd go on ahead, promising they'd see each other later. She tried to get away quickly, while Jinhan could still feel her peach-like scent lingering around him. Then he stopped her, holding her hand, and gently asked if she'd forgotten something. Hayeon couldn't think straight. Her mind was elsewhere, so she had no desire to remember anything at all. It was freezing outside, and she needed to cover the exposed parts of her body so she wouldn't get sick. When Jinhan offered to walk her home, she refused, but then remembered she'd forgotten her purse, which was hanging from his shoulder. At a time like this, she could be waiting for a taxi for a long while. Maybe she wanted to do something, or maybe she'd just stand there feeling miserable. Hayeon wondered if Jinhan had already figured everything out. She didn't know why, but she felt ashamed to look him in the eyes. When he offered to drive her, she didn't refuse. She only asked him to follow the car ahead of them. Jinhan gladly agreed to help Hayeon, telling her to fasten her seatbelt and hold on tight. Jinhye hit the gas, and they took off at a crazy speed. They couldn't lose her boyfriend's car and had to keep following it. The speed was insane, and Hayeon sat in silence, terrified. Jinhan skillfully weaved past cars, one after another, maneuvering effortlessly. They nearly caught up to Jaeol's car, driving side by side. Hayeon didn't even know why she needed this, but she wanted to see where he would stop. She begged Jinhan to slow down, asking if he was trying to get them killed. He reassured her not to worry. After 15 years of driving, he'd never been in an accident. When she glanced at the speedometer, she was shocked. Panic washed over her. The speed was absolutely insane. He caught up to the car, but the closer they got to her boyfriend's vehicle, the more anxious she became. The cars stopped at a traffic light, and finally, they could talk calmly. Jinhan kept his eyes locked on the stranger's car, determined not to lose it from sight. Hayeon apologized to Oppa, feeling like she'd caused him serious trouble. He didn't understand why she was apologizing. Was it because she'd dragged him into her personal mess? But nothing had really happened yet. Still, she could have, if he wanted her to. Hayeon didn't know what to do, so she was grateful Jinhan was by her side. Jinhan had already realized she needed help, and he wasn't about to leave her alone with her pain. Jinhan asked Hayeon once again if she needed help, telling her that if she did, he was ready to do anything to make her feel safe and at ease. He was kind to her for one reason only. Hayeon was the younger sister of his best friend, Ji Sung-won. This situation could easily reach her brother, and she couldn't allow that. She understood perfectly well what the consequences could be, so she had to deal with everything on her own. Why was she hesitating when Jinhan was offering his help without asking for anything in return? She didn't need to be afraid or embarrassed. She just had to take a step forward and trust him. That would be much easier than handling everything by herself. They were already outside the hotel, and Hayeon still couldn't make up her mind. She had no idea what to do. Her head was full of thoughts, and first and foremost, she was thinking about her brother. She didn't want to cause him any unnecessary trouble. Hayeon's boyfriend arrived at the hotel with another woman. He looked like he was on cloud 9, completely unbothered by any guilt over deceiving her. They were clearly having a great time, laughing, relaxing, enjoying each other's company. It was obvious this wasn't their first time together. When Hayeon got a closer look at the girl, she couldn't believe it was Lee Sehul. She was stunned. Had he completely lost his mind being with her? Jinhan asked Hayeon what she wanted to do. Did she feel like getting out of the car and slapping him across the face? Hayeon was surprised. It was his own hotel. So why was he so calm about it? He understood perfectly well that Hayeon couldn't just watch them like that. It was hurting her deeply. It was painful. She tried to calm Jinhan down, saying they shouldn't do anything and that she needed to keep herself under control. But to him, that was just boring. Hayeon finally gathered the courage to call Jae. It was a decisive moment. He might actually answer, even though he had ignored her before. She was curious what he could possibly say in a situation like this, when she was seeing him with another woman right in front of her. She watched Jae glance at his phone, but it was obvious he had no intention of answering the call. Hayeon desperately wanted him to pick up, but instead, he slipped his phone into his pocket and kept talking to the girl beside him. She was furious. Seeing it with her own eyes was unbearable. Jae didn't even try to explain himself. He simply ignored her calls. Jinhan realized this was the moment to act and suggested they get out of the car and look that scumbag straight in the eye. They needed to find a place where they could watch Jae and his new girl without being noticed. Jinhan wanted to suggest grabbing a cup of coffee to wake up a bit, but Hayeon wasn't in the mood and refused. He didn't know how else he could help her. She kept turning down every suggestion he made. Hayeon was sick of everything and wanted to leave. He understood her perfectly, but believed she shouldn't be alone in a state like this. She couldn't watch this any longer and insisted that Jinhan leave her alone. He couldn't do that. Instead, he took her hand and led her to his office. Hayeon hadn't expected something like this from him, but Jinhan decided to do what he thought was right. He told her that he and his staff had checked the guest list and all the suite reservations. The information about her boyfriend had been confirmed. He offered Hayeon a coffee drink, even though it had already gone cold. Hayeon felt deeply embarrassed that Jinhan had accidentally witnessed her boyfriend's betrayal, and that he had to spend his time on her because of it. She apologized to him. Jinhan didn't see anything she needed to apologize for. Besides, he thought she'd already been apologizing all the time, and it was unnecessary. The girl believed she had caused him a lot of trouble, and that was the real issue. She didn't want Jinhan to witness such a humiliating act by her boyfriend, let alone bring her into his office because of it. Jinhan always tried to keep his personal life separate from work, so she felt this was her fault. She wondered if he might get into trouble because she was there. Jinhan knew those people wouldn't say anything, but Hayeon wanted to know what she should do if misunderstandings started to arise. The man said there was no point in worrying about that. The situation had already happened, and nothing could be changed. He explained to Hayeon that rumors about this incident would probably circulate for a while, and she needed to be mentally prepared for that. Hayeon asked Jinhan to let her know immediately if he faced any trouble because of her being there. He couldn't understand why she was more worried about that than about her boyfriend's betrayal. Was she really planning to take all the responsibility on herself and solve his problems for him? She couldn't solve everything, but she might be able to help a little. Still, Jinhan was just joking. She didn't need to worry about any of this. Even so, the real reason and the whole truth lay with her. So Jinhan asked what Hayeon planned to do next. The girl was confused. In that state, she couldn't make any decisions. She didn't even fully understand what had happened, but Jinhan believed she had seen everything with her own eyes. Hayeon didn't know if there was any point in continuing a relationship with someone like Jaeon, especially since she was supposed to marry him this fall. They had been dating for almost a year and a half, yet it felt like she didn't know him at all. She wondered how long he'd been like this. She had no idea what he did when they weren't together. If someone found out, he'd immediately fly from Jeju, dropping his golf plans without hesitation. Hayeon got angry and forbade Jinhan from calling her brother, even though he didn't consider it a big secret at all. Jinhan knew exactly what kind of person Sungwon was. Had she really forgotten that the two of them valued loyalty above all else? No one knew how Sungwon would react when he found out, but it was easy to guess. It wouldn't be calm. After their parents' death, Sungwon tried to fill every void with overprotectiveness. He shielded his younger sister completely and never even allowed himself to think about what he'd do if someone hurt her. Jinhan and Sungwon both worried deeply about her. Hayeon was grateful for that, but she had grown up. She didn't need such constant protection anymore. Even when she was over 40, she would still be a little girl to them. She knew her brother worried about her living alone in Seoul. Hayeon believed she was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. When she said that, Jinhan smiled softly, and she took it as him teasing her, though in reality, he was just trying to cheer her up. Hayeon thought he probably saw her as foolish, but no matter what, he had to pretend he hadn't seen anything, and make sure not to let a word slip to her brother. Was she really asking him to lie? That wouldn't be easy, since too many people had seen them. Still, Hayeon believed it would be simple. They would just act like they had never even met. If only she had known it would turn out like this, she would never have gotten into that car. It really shouldn't concern him at all. He could do whatever he wanted. After all, it was true that they hadn't seen each other for several years, so today's meeting didn't have to happen at all. Jinhan thought she was extremely emotional right now, which meant she couldn't make rational decisions. In that state, she could make a serious mistake. Did she really think none of this mattered to anyone? He sometimes drove past her workplace, but never went inside, not wanting to disturb her. She really did work in a small space, so running into each other during work would have been very noticeable. Hayeon was genuinely surprised. Had he really known everything? She had never even imagined that was possible. She believed Jinhan had completely forgotten about her existence and never thought her life mattered to him at all. Hayeon could have invited him to get dinner the same way she invited Haein, and if she ever needed anything, he was always ready to help. In that case, Oppa had to promise to keep everything a secret, because if her brother found out, he would be deeply upset. Jinhan didn't want her to think he was capable of such manipulation. It was her problem, and she had to deal with it on her own, even though she understood perfectly well how difficult that would be. Hadn't they come here because she couldn't solve the problem? If so, they could just go and deal with it right now. But no, it couldn't be that simple. If Hayeon went to the hotel now, the entire scandal would be all over the news tomorrow. She wondered whether he would be against such a turn of events, while Jinhan was thinking about what was going on inside her small head. What kind of thoughts were forming there? It was a good thing her brother cared so deeply about his sister. On top of that, he had asked his friend to look after Hayeon if he wasn't around. Ji Seung-won. More than 10 years had passed since Jinhan had promised to fulfill his request, and that promise still weighed on him. Hayeon had to be sure about what she was doing. If the problem wasn't resolved, Sungwon would definitely step in, and then Jinhan would be put in a difficult position. Her brother, Chi Sung-won, worried about her far too much. How was she supposed to get married if he went crazy over it every time? A thought crossed Hayeon's mind. Maybe she should just get revenge. Hurt Jaeil the same way he had hurt her. The idea was intriguing, and Jinhan supported it. It could be her homework, something she had to execute perfectly. And he gave her 1 week to do it. Hayeon's workday started as usual. There was a lot to do, because she always made sure everything around her was perfectly organized. She remembered that the deadline for her homework had expired over the weekend, and she still hadn't done anything. All day long, she waited for Cha Jaeil to reply to her messages. Instead of getting angry, she calmed down after receiving a text saying he was extremely tired and couldn't respond. She was in such a state that all she could do was laugh at the nonsense Cha Jaeil was sending her. But as time passed, Hayeon began to feel deeply hurt. It upset her that he allowed himself to lie to her. She replayed his words in her mind and realized it had all been a lie. He had planned that once they got married, she would quit her job and never work again. Cha Jaeil wanted Hayeon to think about no one but him. A hypocritical bastard who kept cheating on her and still had the nerve to say things like that. Hayeon had completely wasted her time on Cha Jaeil. She had trusted him completely and genuinely cared about him, but the results of her efforts disappeared almost instantly. How could she have ever planned a future with someone like that? And why, at such a turning point in her life, did Jinhan, someone she hadn't seen in a long time, suddenly reappear? It was awful. Just thinking about it made her dizzy. Jinhan Oppa had given her a sense of calm and surrounded her with care. Even though they hadn't seen each other in years, she had dragged him into a dirty mess he knew nothing about. All of this happened because of that sick freak Cha Jaeil. Her friend came to work in a great mood, thinking Hayeon's weekend must have been incredibly steamy. Myunghyun asked whether Hayeon had the perfect Valentine's Day she had dreamed of for so long, teasing her playfully. Hayeon understood her curiosity, but things weren't the way her friend imagined. Her friend was surprised to see that Ms. Ji seemed to be in a gloomy mood. Then she started sharing what had happened to her. She had fallen and hurt herself because she was alone on such a special day. She asked Hayeon how her date went and wanted to hear every single detail, down to the smallest thing. Hayeon replied that the date never happened. Her friend was shocked, especially since Hayeon had even left work early. Cha Jae-il had texted that he was very busy and couldn't reply, and Hayeon didn't answer him because she was furious. Her friend was stunned by the story and couldn't believe the date never happened, especially since it was supposed to be their anniversary. Hayeon suspected Cha Jae-il was cheating on her. Myunghyun didn't believe it and thought Hayeon was losing her mind. There was no way Cha Jae-il would cheat. He couldn't do something like that. Hayeon explained that she saw everything with her own eyes. Him walking into a hotel with that woman. She was sure the couple looked very happy and that it wasn't their first time together. As it turned out, he had been busy meeting another woman and had lied about his trip to Busan. Her friend was shocked and thought Hayeon was in serious trouble. The whole mess had started right from Monday. She asked how Hayeon confronted him, saying she couldn't just let it go. If she had seen them, she should have grabbed them by the hair. Hayeon said that Cha Jae-il didn't even know she had seen him with that woman near the hotel. Her friend asked whether Hayeon knew who the woman was. Hayeon had to break up with him immediately. No matter the reason, he had no right to treat her like that. Hayeon fully agreed, even though she had been tense since morning and didn't understand why she still wasn't angry. Myunghyun was furious, so Hayeon tried to calm herself. She wanted to look that snake in the eyes, the woman who dared to interfere in their relationship and steal someone else's boyfriend. Their conversation was interrupted by a girl who walked into the shop and greeted them with a smile. She asked what kind of atmosphere this was so early in the morning and whether something had happened since they looked so upset. She turned to Myunghyun and asked if she was feeling unwell. After all, it was Monday. But it was obvious. She assumed Myunghyun was irritated because the girl hadn't been at work the previous week. Hayeon thought that she looked so energetic. Maybe she had really enjoyed spending time with Cha Jae-il. Myunghyun asked the girl why she hadn't been at work, wondering if she had been sick. Lee Si-ho replied that she hadn't felt well at first, but after some good rest, she felt much better. She told Hayeon that she should relax too, since she didn't look great. Hayeon was confused. Was she really worried about her health? She had always had strong immunity and rarely got sick, to the point others even envied her. Hayeon thought the girl was a sly fox when she asked how Hayeon had spent Valentine's Day. Not wanting to show how bad things really were, Hayeon replied that it had been special. A trip around Seoul with Jinhan Ryu, followed by her boyfriend's betrayal, which forced her into making a deal. It truly was unforgettable. But today was Monday, so it was time to start the workday and work hard despite everything. The girl was surprised by Hayeon's answer and didn't understand how she could act like that after everything that had happened. Work was already in full swing in the office building early in the morning. Miss Kim greeted her director, even though she didn't really feel like working. The director smiled and greeted Secretary Kim. She asked whether he enjoyed the Valentine's Day concert. Jinhan Ryu said he loved it and had a lot of fun. The secretary was pleased that everything went well and that he enjoyed himself. Now Secretary Kim was ready to present the schedule for the week that she had prepared in advance. The director listened carefully to all the plans for the week, though his thoughts occasionally drifted elsewhere. Certain things kept him from fully concentrating, even though he knew he had to keep the promise he had made. Hayeon and her problems were constantly on his mind. He wanted to help her, even though he didn't understand why she had refused his offer. He wanted Hayeon to drink something and go home, but she didn't want to. Either way, Jinhan needed to walk her home. It would make him feel much more at ease. Was it her brother who ordered him to do this? Hayeon asked seriously, wanting to know why he was acting this way. Did he really see her as a little child? His thoughts were focused on whether Hayeon had managed to deal with the situation on her own. He hadn't heard anything else from her, just a message saying she had made it home safely. Jinhan Ryu immediately turned to Secretary Kim, who was listening very attentively, even though she could tell his thoughts were far from work. He asked her what she thought the phrase overprotectiveness meant. She didn't understand at all and assumed it was some kind of test, but it wasn't. Personally, she believed that no one should interfere too much in someone else's life. You shouldn't try to bend another person to your own will. It turned out that excessive attention was unacceptable, even though to him it seemed like it didn't affect anything at all. The previous week, a client had visited him, and they had tea together because they hadn't seen each other in a long time due to certain obstacles. Secretary Kim remembered that clearly, but pointed out that it happened after working hours. She also remembered that all weekend long, everyone in the company had been talking about Jinhan Ryu's woman. In the past, no one could just walk into the company like that, and client meetings were strictly limited to working hours. That rule applied even to family members. No one could come in after hours. And on top of that, a company car had even been called for the client. The director asked why Secretary Kim hadn't mentioned this, but she believed she had no right to know about it at all. A meeting of executives was coming up very soon, so it was time to leave. Being late to events like that was unacceptable. Meanwhile, Hayeon thought Myunghyun had been under a lot of stress lately. She had recently conducted job interviews for the company and prepared extensively, but without success. Her body reacted immediately to stress, so she needed to get energy from somewhere, something she had been lacking recently. When she was stressed, she absolutely needed to eat something sweet to help her body recover. Aromatherapy also involved many psychological factors. It might be worth trying that approach and using specific scents that helped strengthen stress resistance. Hayeon tried hard to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the thought of that girl enjoying herself with her boyfriend, and then daring to ask about Hayeon's emotional state. Why was she acting so tense? There was no way she could know that Hayeon had seen her together with Cha Jaeol. Hayeon pretended everything was fine and put on a cheerful mood, even though deep down it was incredibly hard for her. Lee Si-ho tried to act friendly, even though she knew she was ruining Hayeon's life by dating her boyfriend. That irritated her deeply, because things weren't turning out the way she had expected at all. When Hayeon said that she had spent Valentine's Day wonderfully and that those moments were special in her life, Lee Si-ho began to seriously doubt her words. Cha Jaeol had spent the entire evening with her, so how could Hayeon have had a special day? She couldn't understand it. Why did Hayeon even think she deserved something special? After waiting for the lunch break, the girl got ready and decided to leave, explaining that she had a scheduled meeting at that time. Hayeon couldn't understand where she suddenly got so much energy from, or whether she had gone to meet Cha Jaeol. And yes, she had made a decision. The longer she dragged it out, the more pain she would only cause herself. Myunghyun thought Hayeon ancestors had protected her well. But what if she had married a man like that? A breakup was far better than a divorce. That was truly the case. Ending things now was better than dealing with a long, painful divorce after marriage. Hayeon worried about everything while being busy, and there was always support she could only dream of. Polite customer service was their main task and the most important rule that every employee had to follow. That was absolutely true. Today she paid especially close attention to Lee Si-ho's actions and didn't say a single harsh word to her. Hayeon asked her Uni whether Si-ho wasn't actually doing an excellent job. Despite all the concerns, she believed Si-ho handled her work very well. Hayeon couldn't disagree. Maybe that was exactly why Cha Jaeol liked her. Just looking at her made people want to smile. Still, it was interesting to know whether Si-ho truly loved Cha Jaeol, or if she was just pretending, trying to take everything that didn't belong to her. If you really thought about it, things were going pretty well for them. They worked together smoothly, Myunghyun developed new products, and Hayeon sold them perfectly. Hayeon believed that without Myunghyun, she wouldn't even be here, and that was a shared belief between them. Hayeon noticed a message from Jinhan Ryu oppa, asking whether she had completed her homework. He was impatiently waiting for Hayeon's reply because he wanted to see her, but he couldn't find any other excuse to meet her. A message from Ji Hayeon finally came through, saying she'd finished her homework. The man figured she must have thought long and hard before hitting send. He wondered where his reward was for going along with this little lie. Just then, Secretary Kim informed the director that the marketing department had just called. They reported that Kaifi had refused to continue working with them, which was both strange and unpleasant. Secretary Kim wanted to know what they were going to do next, but Jinhan barely heard her. He was too busy wondering why Hayeon's reply had been so short. Last year, they had successfully opened a hotel on Jeju Island called A Story in the Garden. It was a special project that attracted people through scent. The best workshops and small to mid-sized businesses lined up to take part. It would have been the perfect opportunity for Kaifi. But would they really want to join? Jinhan's thoughts tangled together, and he couldn't focus on a single thing. It was a great chance to solidify their position, Jinhan thought, even as Secretary Kim suggested calling Kaifi again. The director didn't agree. One phone call wouldn't magically solve all their problems. They needed another way out. They had reached the 22nd floor when the director told Secretary he'd handle it personally. They could meet again later for lunch. Secretary Kim stayed by the elevator doors as the director walked away. She called after him that they'd see each other later and wished him a good meal. Jinhan had a meeting scheduled and didn't want to be late. Being late in this situation was unacceptable. He rarely came to this place, but he was always glad to visit, even though he knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. They already saw each other at home almost every weekend, so why go anywhere else? Jinhan asked if she was really unhappy about having the chance to eat with her family. Jinhan Ryu, director of HS Cosmetics and Jinhan's younger sister, didn't think so. She just believed that only their grandfather still cared about this tradition. Times had changed. How long were they going to keep it up? Right now, they were all busy people with packed schedules, and these meetings felt like a waste of time. Jinhan was surprised to see that he was here too, the chairman of the company, and Jinhan's father. Together, they asked him how his morning meeting had gone. Their father was pleased. The meeting had gone great. Jinhan's brother had done an excellent job, and everyone praised him. He wanted Jinhan to talk in more detail about the Jeju Hotel, especially since he'd mentioned an amazing garden there before. Jinhan confirmed everything and said the opening was planned for June. He intended to make it the island's main attraction, and well known beyond it. Their father was satisfied and thought his son had big ambitions. When Jinhan put in full effort, everyone expected major wins from him. He asked if Jinhan really planned to plant a huge number of hydrangeas in the garden. Jinhan did plan to create an open banquet hall and a flower garden, but his father wondered if it was really worth it. Jinhan wanted to make the place famous. Their father had also heard about another project called Scent of a Date and wanted to learn more about it. It would be an event where people chose a partner based on body scent, without considering looks or prior connections. A marketing method based on primal instincts, pheromones. Yoon didn't believe an idea like that could actually work. She asked why Jinhan still hadn't presented a plan for the project and when he intended to do so. He promised it would be soon. Their father didn't object and said that if help was needed, Yoon could be trusted. She worked hard too. Jinhan thought that would be great, but a separate team was already handling the planning, and they were doing an excellent job. Yoon didn't understand what he meant. Had he deliberately assigned a separate team? Everything had to match their brand, but could that team really handle it when they could do better? Jinhan believed it didn't align with her goals or responsibilities. This wasn't the scale she was used to. It was a small company, but with big ambitions. They wanted to give others a chance to succeed. Jinhan believed her company was already successful and didn't need this opportunity. Yoon was shocked that Jinhan could trust unproven companies, especially with that level of responsibility. Jinhan kept thinking about the scent that always lingered around Hayeon. He believed they would definitely achieve their goals and that the hotel would be a success, attracting countless visitors and tourists. His sister asked why he was so confident. Jinhan thought the event would bring something new to the company, something impossible to ignore. Yoon smiled skeptically. Was that really it? Was that why he was willing to take such a big risk? She knew her brother always liked things done his way. If Yoon wanted to observe, Jinhan didn't mind. She didn't like that he hadn't offered her a role, and their father tried to calm her down. She shouldn't be angry at her brother, and had to admit she wouldn't win this argument. This was a business that needed constant expansion, not recycled ideas. Yoon repeated that it was their father who told her to get into this business, and now he wouldn't let her take part in the project. It would have been better to give her the entire Jeju Hotel, but instead he gave her a company out on the outskirts. Handing everything to Jinhan wasn't smart. Their father couldn't believe his daughter's words. Her brother had achieved his position on his own. So what had she personally accomplished? Yoon was used to having everything handed to her, with others doing the work while she simply benefited. Yoon snapped and told her father that he only drank in the evenings while claiming he had meetings. Did he really think Jinhan had never failed at anything? She said her brother had already failed twice, but never told anyone about it. Their father warned her to be careful with her words. She had no right to humiliate people. Yoon turned to her brother and asked if she was lying. After all, he'd already broken off 2 engagements, and she wanted him to confirm it. Jinhan thought it was happening all over again. He'd broken off those engagements and never once regretted it. Something had always been missing. He suggested discussing the project later, but his father refused. If there was something to say, it had to be said now. He pointed out that Jinhan's actions were provoking his sister to talk this way. Didn't he feel lonely? It had already been 2 years. The eldest son of the family had been engaged twice. Had he really never regretted his choices? His reputation was now at risk. Their father had had enough and decided that in the near future, Jinhan needed to meet a woman and marry her. He waited for his son's answer, but Jinhan stayed silent. Did he enjoy being alone? Or just not have the time? This time, Jinhan promised he'd deal with it, but he couldn't promise it would happen as fast as his father wanted. Their father grew angry, thinking that if he could handle it himself, he wouldn't be talking about it. Maybe Jinhan believed work mattered more than anything. He saw it as his duty to secure a successor. Or was Jinhan planning to get rid of the company altogether? Ryu Yoon asked her father if he could meet with her brother separately to tell him everything, since she didn't have the time. She was too busy. Their father understood that the conversation could wrap up for today, so everyone could go about their own business. Jinhan asked his father if he really intended to leave first, since he still had a few things he wanted to discuss. The man said he'd talk to his son another time, but for now, he had to go. He suggested that his son come home on the weekends, since their mother was curious about how things were going. Jinhan warned his father to be careful on the road. Ryu Yun-young grumbled. Did they always have to listen to his nagging? After meeting with their father, she always felt stressed. Jinhan said they should have gotten used to it by now. The father was always irritated. She thought Jinhan was a good son, but she was tired too and was leaving. The man asked if his sister was heading to work or planning to work from home. Young said no. She had no more work obligations and was rushing off to spa treatments. It's amazing she hasn't spent all her money yet, Jinhan thought, knowing it wasn't easy to cover her expenses. His sister figured their company was rich, so she could afford it. If she worried her brother too much, he could send her to his hotel in Jeju. He suggested she write a business plan and he'd take a look. She thought people like him always caused a lot of trouble. His head was full of all kinds of clutter, which kept him from thinking clearly. Jinhan wished his sister a safe trip, but didn't understand why she said his head was full of junk. Could it really be true? This was Hayeon Ji's workplace, where she spent a lot of her time. Lee Si-ho heard someone enter the store, so without even looking that way, she apologized and told them they were already closed. When she looked up and saw who it was, she was very surprised. It was Cha Jae-il. But why was he here? And what was the reason for his visit to their store? The girl didn't know, though she was happy to see him. She approached him carefully and held his hand, trying to figure out the reason for his visit. At first, Lee Si-ho thought he had come for her, but judging by Cha Jae-il's expression, she realized immediately that wasn't the case. Holding his hand, she asked Oppa why he was here, but he asked where Hayeon was. Lee Si-ho felt upset. Could it be that he came here just to see Hayeon? Cha Jae-il smiled faintly, confirming her suspicion. He asked again where Hayeon was. Had she already gone home? When Lee Si-ho said Hayeon was in the studio, Cha Jae-il asked for permission to go see her. Lee Si-ho was extremely upset by Cha Jae-il's action and felt angry at him. Hayeon, hearing the conversation in the store, came out of the studio to find out what was going on and who had visited. She was shocked. She didn't expect to see Jae-il. At that moment, she didn't even think about how to act around him after everything she had seen with her own eyes. The man hugged Hayeon tightly, and she felt repulsed to touch him, knowing he had embraced another woman. She asked him why he was here and what brought him to the store. Had he returned so quickly from another city? And why hadn't he warned her about his visit? Lee Si-ho felt both uncomfortable and hurt watching Cha Jae-il hug Hayeon. Even though he acted as if nothing had happened, it was like he was seeing his girlfriend again after a long separation. Hayeon still tried to figure out what Cha Jae-il was doing here. The man explained that he had just popped in after work and wanted to know if she had finished her tasks. Hayeon had already finished work, but she wasn't happy to see him after everything he'd done to their relationship. Si-ho decided to remind her that she had promised to help her with something after work. Had she forgotten about it? Hayeon told Cha Jae-il she had a few things left to finish, and only after that would she be free. He agreed to wait for her in the store. She suggested he sit down since he'd have to wait a while, and then she'd quickly get ready so they could leave. Si-ho wanted Hayeon to leave sooner and left her alone with Cha Jae-il, at least for a little while. Hayeon understood perfectly that Si-ho wanted to talk with her guy. She was curious to see how they'd behave alone together. Si-ho waited for the man to start explaining what was really going on, since she didn't like how he was acting toward her. Hayeon deliberately said she'd step out of the store for a few minutes to overhear their conversation in her absence. Every time Cha Jae-il came to the store, he always found something new to notice. Si-ho was great at arranging things, always putting the latest products on the most visible shelves to attract attention to the new arrivals. Hayeon caught herself thinking she wanted to stab him in the back with a knife. But she couldn't. She thought she was restless, yet she still managed her work well. Hayeon watched them and considered them good actors, trying not to make eye contact so they wouldn't show interest in each other. From another angle, it seemed like they didn't even know each other. Hayeon wondered what Cha Jae-il thought coming to their workplace. He was too confident to apologize to her and had lost any sense of shyness, especially if he came just to see Si-ho. Maybe she should wait to see his true face. Then, Hayeon decided to ask how his trip to Busan went. He seemed satisfied with the trip, having met his sunbae. They drank together and had a great talk. Hayeon thought to herself how convincingly he lied about meeting a sunbae who might not even exist. Cha Jae-il asked about her brother, but she hadn't been to Jeju, so she had nothing to say. He asked what had stopped her from going since she had planned it for a long time. He assumed she had enjoyed Jeju so much that he didn't call her to avoid interrupting family time. Hayeon explained that something had come up, and she needed to finish some homework. When Jinhan said she only had a week, she thought she had plenty of time, but wanted to finish it as quickly as possible. And this was a good opportunity. Cha-jeol didn't understand what homework she meant, but assumed it was some extra work. Siho could no longer watch Cha-jeol's interaction with Hayeon, so she decided to offer him a cup of tea. He asked Siho if she had eaten, and when she said no, he said she had been working too hard, and skipping meals was bad for her health. This meant she'd have a late dinner, which would harm her body and keep her from resting well at night. Hayeon listened to their conversation and felt disgusted. Cha-jeol asked Hayeon if she hadn't forgotten about this Saturday since they had planned to go to the festival together. Hayeon remembered that his mother's 60th birthday was coming up and that they had booked a table at the hotel restaurant 2 months in advance. His mom had been looking forward to it and planned ahead. Lately, they hadn't talked much, which made her sad. Hayeon Ji couldn't even call her. The girl became angry and did not understand why this woman allowed herself to treat her this way. Thinking back, Chaeol's mother had been bringing up marriage more frequently recently. It started when they found out that she and her brother had inherited a large fortune after their parents' deaths. Chaeol recalled that his mother said she wanted to have a serious talk with them about marriage this time. Lee Siho was so startled by these words that she dropped a bottle of perfume. Hayeon understood why she was so nervous. Siho had been in the same position before. Siho promised to clean everything quickly, but she was forbidden from doing so because she might accidentally hurt herself. As expected, she tried to clean up herself and cut her hand on broken glass. Hayeon tried to stop her, but she didn't listen, and soon they saw blood flowing from her hand. Cha-jeol was very concerned and told Hayeon to quickly bring a first aid kit to treat Shiho's wound. He called her a fool because he didn't understand why she was standing there instead of running to get the kit immediately. He wanted her to follow his orders quickly, but realized there was nothing in the store to treat the wound. He planned to run to the pharmacy while Hayeon watched over Siho. It was clear Cha-jeol was very anxious, which meant Siho mattered to him. Hayeon didn't feel like helping since Siho was responsible for injuring her own hand. The girl pressed a tissue to her finger to stop the bleeding. Hayeon asked if it hurt and why she was trembling so much. Siho said she was fine and it didn't hurt. Hayeon thought she should be the one trembling with anger because she couldn't control herself anymore. Hayeon went mad when she saw Cha-jeol running to the pharmacy. This was his true face. But Siho wanted to ask Hayeon if it was true that she and Jaeol were getting married. Hayeon understood why she was so curious and wanted to answer in a way that would really hurt her. Nothing was decided yet, but Hayeon smiled and asked if maybe she wanted to catch the bouquet at the wedding. Then Hayeon clarified that she was joking, but asked why Shiho was so surprised. There was nothing serious about it. Jaeol kept urging her and insisted that they get married as soon as possible. Hayeon wanted to see the girl's reaction, but maybe Cha-jeol was deceiving both of them for his own purposes. Siho didn't want to answer Hayeon's questions about her situation, so she pretended her hand hurt badly. Hayeon asked if she didn't want to tell her anything, since it seemed their friendship had cooled off. Siho understood what she meant, but pretended not to know. Siho's phone buzzed with a message from Jaeol, telling her to come out quickly because he had told Hayeon he needed to get back to work. The girl wanted to make sure Hayeon hadn't noticed the message from Jaeol. The girls looked at each other and smiled sweetly, but both knew each was hiding something the other didn't need to know. Siho smiled and said she'd been getting a lot of spam messages lately. But Hayeon thought she'd at least have the decency to confess everything to her. Yet looking at her now, Hayeon realized she had been foolish to trust her humanity. It was hard to say, but she mustered the courage and admitted that, actually, on Friday she had been near the hotel and saw someone who looked just like Lee Siho. It couldn't have been a coincidence. Siho immediately denied it, saying it couldn't be true. She had been sick and resting that day, unable to move a finger, let alone be near the hotel. When Siho asked who Hayeon had been near the hotel with, she didn't know what to say, fully aware she couldn't tell the truth. Hayeon found it amusing watching her friend fumble and lie convincingly. She understood what game Siho was playing and replied with a slight smile that she had been seeing a friend. Why, are you interested in who it was? Siho visibly tensed up and replied that this was not the case at all, because people don't just go to hotels to spend the night. She knew that you could also have dinner in the restaurant there. But in any case, how will Jaeol react to this? Siho nervously fiddled with her necklace. Hayeon smiled. She felt strange because, for some reason, she didn't even feel angry. She just calmly replied that Jaeol was seeing someone else at the time. Then she asked where Siho got such an interesting necklace. Siho explained it was a gift from her boyfriend. Very beautiful, so she never took it off. Jaeol had very good taste, and now Hayeon saw that the couple suited each other perfectly. At that moment, a man entered the store, mentioning the pharmacy was quite far from them. He handed over a bag of medicine and said he'd brought everything. He smelled of tobacco, which meant he had been waiting for Siho to come out to him. Hayeon apologized, but suggested he take care of Siho's hand himself. If she wanted to go home earlier, the store needed to be tidied up. Cheol carefully treated the girl's wound and tried to cover it with a bandage, but she kept squealing as if it hurt. She asked him to be careful, and he apologized for hurting her. It was such a sweet scene that Hayeon couldn't bear to watch. Cheol gently blew on Siho's finger to ease her pain. Not every guy would care for someone so attentively. 68. Siho liked that he cared about her and didn't pay any attention to Hayeon wandering around nearby. Hayeon couldn't understand how she hadn't noticed this before, and her heart froze. She felt like such a naive fool. She noticed Siho brushing her leg against the guy under the table. It was very bold. His expression clearly showed he was encouraging Siho to leave the store with him, and he was succeeding even without words. Siho understood him perfectly and used her gaze to ask how they would manage it without Hayeon suspecting anything. Meanwhile, Hayeon approached them and asked if she was bothering them since they were chatting so sweetly together. Cha Jaeil thought Hayeon should have been kind to her friend, not drive her to tears. Sitting in Jaeil's car, Hayeon thought maybe it wasn't the right time to say anything, so she advised him to focus on the road since he looked irritated. The man wondered why she was so cold, since her friend had been hurt. Hayeon was curious too. He had bought a bandage, everything seemed fine, so what was the problem? Why was she so heartless when someone got hurt? Siho was injured and couldn't run the store properly, which meant double the work for Hayeon. The girl didn't think that's what he meant. She said she hadn't noticed before that he could be such a caring. The man was surprised by her sarcasm, but that didn't matter right now. In her opinion, he shouldn't have worried so much when her friend was hurt. Hayeon ignored his words until he said she was acting like a little child, which really annoyed her. Hayeon wanted Jaeil to stop the car immediately, but he told her not to. Despite being tired, he still came to her. This man had grown so bold and lost all sense of decency, daring to make her feel guilty in this situation. He didn't know why Hayeon was so angry, but he shouldn't have reacted so emotionally. Still, he thought anyone would have acted the same. Someone was hurt, and he was the first there, so there was no need to dramatize and make it a huge problem. He noticed Hayeon had been sharp with her words today, so he felt a bit uneasy. He said that she should still call Siho later and ask if she got home safely, since she had left in tears. If he was so worried, why didn't he just call her personally? Hayeon asked. The man started raising his voice again, wondering if she really intended to act this way. She could have ignored it, but she could at least explain what she was unhappy about. Was it because he met with Jungmin last week? But he was innocent in this case, as he couldn't have known he would be there. Hayeon couldn't take the lies anymore, so she told him to stop the car and say nothing more. Sitting in the car, Hayeon noticed a familiar earring in the door pocket. The man kept insisting she talk to him, and finally, she said what was going on. After seeing it, she was completely sure there was nothing left to discuss. He couldn't deny it now. The earring was unique and very beautiful. It was handmade, one of a kind. Hayeon was certain it belonged to Siho, since the girl had recently shown it off. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak, looking him straight in the eyes. She suggested they break up right then, and didn't want to explain the reason. Cha Jaeil didn't understand what she was saying or what had happened to her, but Hayeon thought it was long overdue. Hayeon got out of the car, even though the man told her to get back in. She thanked him for the ride and wished him a safe journey. The man shouted after her to stop, warning she could make a huge mistake in her life with that action. He hadn't expected her to break up with him. Everything had been fine until today, so he wanted an explanation for her decision. He was disappointed and saddened by how things turned out. He had been counting on marrying Hayeon, and his mom was already looking forward to meeting her. Only the devil knows what was going through this girl's mind, but it seemed like she was very angry about something. Cha Jaeil took out cigarettes from his pocket, but of course, they were gone. Right now, he just wanted to know what exactly Hayeon was upset about. Today, he had to restrain himself, since his mom's anniversary was this weekend. He admitted he had miscalculated and been overconfident, losing his guard. From his swearing, it was clear the man was angry, because he hadn't expected a breakup with this girl. He didn't even know what to do next, but realized it would be very difficult to mend things with Hayeon, and he had very little time. He looked inside the car and saw the big gift box he had prepared in advance, but never got a chance to give. Jaeil sent her a message she didn't like. He wrote that he was giving her time to think and weigh everything. Even in this situation, he acted arrogantly, ignoring her feelings. Though the morning was chilly, Hayeon went outside to breathe fresh air after a short nap. Looking at her yard, Hayeon realized she had a lot of work ahead, which she was happy to take on. Even though the trees were bare, they were still beautiful, almost whispering their wonderful stories to her. The weather changed quickly. Bright sunshine, then hiding behind clouds, resting for a while. She didn't want to admit that she felt lonely in this house, and sometimes wished she could turn back time. Looking at her living room, she realized it was empty, with no one to talk to. She remembered the times when the whole family gathered in the living room to discuss family matters. They laughed, joked, and planned their future together. Hayeon never imagined her carefree life with her family could be shattered so quickly. She remembered the day she was told she had to urgently go to Seoul. At that time, she was traveling with friends for her birthday when she learned of her parents' death. Unknown attackers stabbed her parents, and they didn't survive. There was no chance to save them. Their ordinary life was fragile and shattered in an instant. At that time, they didn't realize how hard it would be to rebuild their lives alone. They inherited a building in Sunsadong, where Kipi now stood. The ownership was officially passed to Hayeon. After the funeral, Hayeon couldn't face reality, so she took a leave and underwent psychiatric treatment. After some time, she began to feel better, thanks to aromatherapy, which she had previously been skeptical about. Impulsively, she decided to change her career, trying to escape the world. Hayeon went abroad to study. Meanwhile, Ji Seung-won opened his own wine bar, working as both bartender and manager. He traveled around the world, gathering information to write his own book. Much later, he met Yuwol in Jeju. They got married because they were expecting a baby. Thanks to the parents' support, they wanted for nothing. It was a hard and tragic event. Even though a lot of time had passed, Hayeon still couldn't be happy again. She really wanted to see her mom. She smiled. Was it really her? And why was she constantly spiraling into negativity? She decided it was time for a change. To start fresh, she first needed to clear her mind and tackle cleaning the whole house. The deep cleaning was in full swing. She was getting rid of unnecessary things and purging the house of constant negativity and memories. Using a cleaning vacuum, she meticulously washed the floors so that not a single trace of dirt remained. Then she moved to the yard and decided to get everything in order there. She started by watering the flowers that had long looked wilted and sad. The deep cleaning helped her, and the cleanliness around her made life easier. The yard looked beautiful, but it lacked greenery. Soon spring would come, and everything would feel alive again, as if waking from a long sleep. True, no matter how harsh winter is, it can't last forever. You just have to get through it, and spring will surely arrive. That's exactly what would happen in her life. She just needed to survive this difficult time, and sooner or later, she would be happy again. A little gift from her brother, Ji Seung-won. She barely ate what he sent last time, and here it was again. She had said many times she couldn't eat so much by herself, but he never listened and kept sending large quantities. She decided to put in the fridge what she could eat immediately. From the rest, she planned to make syrup and marmalade. Myunghan Unni and Hain Unni would be very happy if she treated them to these homemade goodies. She prepared and packed the jars without even realizing it was a bit much, though it looked very nice. Hayeon finally finished everything, but realized she might have overdone it. She wasn't sure what to do next. Maybe she needed to call a courier. The orange juice was very sweet and tasty, so the girl almost always drank only that. She smiled, surprised. Was it really true that he had asked her for this favor? Could this really not be a joke? He wanted her to perform at the opening of his project, History in the Garden. Jinhan confirmed it, but the main thing was that her schedule wouldn't be disrupted. The girl knew she could always adjust her schedule. The man thought she'd gladly agree if he asked nicely. But how could she refuse when Jinhan insisted so much? Besides, it was a new experience for her, one she could enjoy. Jinhan knew perfectly well that Hain wasn't the type of person to use her connections for personal gain. She agreed to perform only because he personally asked her to. Jinhan understood this perfectly and was grateful she didn't refuse him. But first, she needed to figure some things out. She wanted to know why he had bought so much food. Jinhan was surprised. Didn't she like it? But she couldn't wrap her head around how anyone could eat that much. Of course, she always liked treats, especially fragrant pastries, and this place really made them well. Hayeon was always amazed at how she managed to eat so much at once. It was so delicious, and she couldn't stop until everything was gone. The girl received a call, so she asked Jinhan to wait a few minutes, but he didn't want her to answer it. It was her little sister calling, and she was glad to hear from her. They hadn't spoken in a long time. Jinhan was surprised. Who was this sister who could call her? Someone said he sent Hayeon a package from Jeju, and this time, it was huge again. Thanks to her brother, she could eat properly now. She promised she'd come right over. Jinhan guessed it was Hayeon. He asked if it was really Hayeon on the phone. Yes, it was her. Hain said she made fruit juice and marmalade for her and asked him to give her a ride. Jinhan didn't understand why he had to do it, since she came in her own car. But she had a lot of things and couldn't carry it all herself. She helped him increase bakery sales at his hotel. Could he really treat his VIP clients like that? She had little time, and she handed him the bag saying that Hayeon Ji's generosity was boundless, so maybe he would also be lucky enough to get some sweets. She asked with a laugh, "Can't the almighty executive managing director get away from work for a little while?" Her brother-in-law, the vice president of Jinhan Ryu's company, was always on standby for her sister. Jinhan paused briefly, thinking about how his vice president, Pehan, seemed to be madly in love with his wife. Hayeon hurried him along, reminding him that she didn't have much time, and the man smiled indulgently, acknowledging that he had no choice in the matter. Meanwhile, at Hayeon Ji's house, drama was about to erupt. Cha Jae-oh was exhausted from comforting Siho almost all night. But he couldn't just leave the situation with Hayeon unresolved. He needed to handle everything to make the wedding with Hayeon happen, since it wasn't in his best interest otherwise. He stood in front of Hayeon's house, waiting for her response. He was ready for a positive conversation and confident he could make it work. He asked her to open the door and speak face to face. Yesterday he had gotten too angry and pressured her, but today he admitted his mistake and wanted a chance to apologize. Standing at Hayeon's door, he didn't even notice she was standing beside him, not expecting to see him there. She didn't want to talk to Cha Jae-oh at all, believing she had already made her decision and didn't want to change it. He tried to convince her not to think of it as over, insisting they couldn't just end things like this. He wanted to at least know why she made her decision. She was surprised. Did he really not know why she wanted to break up and never involve herself with him again? Cha Jae-oh thought maybe Hayeon had figured him and Siho out. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so cold. He had to make sure not to reveal anything. No matter how much he thought, he couldn't understand the reason. But she believed there was nothing to figure out. Just accept it as it was. She had already made up her mind, so there was nothing left to do. Their relationship couldn't be restored. If he still didn't know the reason for the breakup, she had nothing more to say. He could leave, but he wanted her to wait a minute longer to apologize one more time. Hayeon didn't need his apology. She had made up her mind, though she could reflect on some points. When she stopped, Cha Jae-oh thought it had worked and that she might forgive him. At that moment, she thought if he were really reflecting on what he'd done, they wouldn't be talking. He couldn't be that shameless. He said he hadn't slept all night and asked for one last chance. Hayeon smiled and decided to ask if he deserved forgiveness. Because of Siho, he hadn't slept at all today, but he had to somehow make Hayeon reconsider. So what could Jae-oh offer her today? She asked him. He was surprised. Was she proposing a deal? It wasn't a deal. She just hadn't heard the answer to her question. Honestly, she could have pretended to be naive and ignored it all, but she no longer wanted to and couldn't trust him. Was there any point in continuing the relationship if there was no trust or love? Cha Jae-oh realized she knew everything about his betrayals. He was lost and didn't know what to do next. Denying it was pointless. He decided to confess everything to Hayeon, explaining it was the biggest mistake of his life and he deeply regretted it. Hayeon thought he should take a course for cheating men, where they could teach him to come up with more original stories than his. He said everyone has the right to make mistakes, but in such cases, she should pretend it's fine and ignore it. But she could act like him too. Anything can happen in life, and she didn't think he'd like that. He didn't understand why she said that. It wasn't true. He had thought it all through and decided to marry Hayeon. Unexpectedly, Hayeon asked for his phone. When he asked why, she said nothing. She unlocked it and accessed the contacts to see who he'd been calling frequently. When she opened the contacts, everything was exactly as she expected. Hayeon decided to call the number, and as she expected, Siho answered. Siho cheerfully replied, "Hi, honey." Hayeon cheerfully replied, "Hi, honey. Jae-oh just said you were a mistake." She told Siho that Cha Jae-oh was standing outside her house, apologizing and admitting he had made a big mistake. The man sharply grabbed his phone back from Hayeon and asked why she did that. But she asked if you really didn't want her to. He tried to end the conversation with Siho so she wouldn't overhear them. He said she could hit him in the face as many times as she wanted if it made her feel better. When Hayeon asked him why he thought it would be easier for her or that she was going to do something like that, the man replied that they would get married anyway. If she wanted him to take full responsibility, he promised he would always take care of her. Jae-oh couldn't let all his efforts go to waste. He couldn't say he didn't love Hayeon. It was just that his desires had gotten the better of him at some point. He chose her because she was more suitable as a wife than Siho, and now they could part ways. That could never happen, though, because his mother was expecting a celebration for her anniversary. Could it be that Cha Jae-oh still didn't understand what had happened and dared to blame her for everything? The man suggested that Hayeon hit him again and again, finally settling all the issues between them. But Hayeon wanted him to go to Siho and let her be. He asked Hayeon to at least keep her promise and come to his mother's anniversary this weekend. The request sounded strange coming from him, as Cha Jae-il might have had an ulterior motive. He handed Hayeon a gift bag and wanted her to give it to his mother, claiming that there is a gift that she will definitely like. Hayeon didn't understand. Was this gift not for her? It wasn't even an apology, but a present for his mother's anniversary. She wanted to swing the gift bag at Cha Jae-il, but heard a voice behind her that stopped her. Hayeon asked Hayeon what was going on and why she was shouting so loudly it could be heard down the street. When Hayeon turned, she saw Ju Hae-in, who had come at her request. Hayeon didn't want her friend to witness these shameful arguments with Cha Jae-il. Hayeon felt embarrassed in front of Haein that things had come to this, humiliating her dignity. She wanted to leave quickly and not continue the conversation with Cha Jae-il in Ju Hae-in's presence, who could sometimes be sharp in her words. Hayeon looked at the car the girl arrived in and realized she hadn't come alone. She saw Jinhan get out of the car, also heading toward them. The situation made her want to sink through the ground from embarrassment. Hayeon wondered what Jinhan Ryu was doing there. She had only invited Hae-in. Why hadn't they told her they would come together? Why had he decided to visit her? Maybe he was just accompanying Ju Hae-in, or perhaps he had some business nearby. Hayeon prepared her favorite dish, and when the guests entered her house, they were greeted by that incredible aroma. When Jinhan asked why she wasn't at work, she said it was her day off. Ju Hae-in wondered why she was sitting at home when the weather outside was so nice. Ju Hae-in recalled the situation with Cha Jae-il outside and was curious about what had really happened. Why did Cha Jae-il run off as soon as he saw them? But it didn't matter. She never liked him anyway. To Jo Hae-in, that guy was always hard to understand and didn't act properly toward her friend. They thought it was better to focus on something productive than to dwell on sadness. Ju Hae-in asked Hayeon and poured her a drink. Hayeon noticed Jinhan standing, so she suggested he sit on the couch and finally relax. She asked what they wanted to drink. Ju Hae-in heard that Hayeon had made amazing fruit juice, so maybe she could serve that. Then she asked Jinhan if he tried Hayeon's juice yet. Hayeon wanted to mention that the juice would taste even better if it sat for a few days. Her brother had sent a lot of green tea, which she could offer them, since it had way more caffeine than the juice. Her sister immediately agreed to drink the green tea, and Jinhan didn't refuse either. Since the last meeting with Hayeon, Jinhan had been thinking about her constantly. The continuation of the project was a great opportunity for her, but she had declined. So he wanted to see her and find out why. He hadn't expected to see her so soon. Jinhan looked at her and realized she was very upset. He guessed the reason had to do with Cha Jae-il, who had betrayed her. It was noticeable that she sometimes drifted into her thoughts, not even hearing what the guests were asking. Jinhan didn't take his eyes off Hayeon, confident that she would share her problems with them when ready. But she didn't want to do it in front of her friend, feeling embarrassed about being betrayed by her boyfriend. She had prepared the green tea to her guests, sure they'd like it because it was very flavorful. She was just doing what needed to be done, and Jinhan completely understood. He was glad she held herself together and didn't despair. She asked if the guests were hungry, but they had eaten a few hours ago, so they agreed to have some fruit. Hayeon checked the clock. It was already 3 p.m., and she hadn't eaten anything yet. Jinhan said she shouldn't skip meals. Breakfast was important. But when she was busy, she sometimes even missed lunch. Hayeon liked that Jinhan cared about her and asked if she had eaten anything today. Until now, only her brother had looked after her. Hayeon didn't know Jinhan would come, and she had nothing to offer him. So she suggested fruit. Jinhan remembered how her mother had also served him fruit and made rice cakes and cookies. Could it be that Hayeon still used her mother's plates? Jo Hae-in asked the girl if she had broken up with Cha Jae-on, but Hayeon didn't want to talk about it now. Honestly, she never liked her boyfriend from the start. He acted like some charming prince, and finally, he revealed his true face. Her friend tried to explain to Jinhan that the guy they had seen outside Hayeon's house was her boyfriend, but he was just a piece of trash. Jo Hae-in had long asked Hayeon Ji to get rid of him, knowing he wasn't right for her. Hayeon didn't want to talk about Cha Jae-il or her personal life anymore. Ultimately, why bring it up in front of Oppa? She knew Hayeon was very angry about it. Jinhan thought he understood everything, since he had witnessed what happened. He gave her a week to sort things out and make the right decision. Hayeon usually liked to lecture her, but today Hayeon wanted to know about her friend's relationship with her boyfriend. Hayeon replied that they were like a married couple who had lived together for almost 30 years. In a year, she would throw the bouquet to Hayeon. Of course, it was possible Hayeon would get married first. That was entirely likely. Jinhan thought the girl was telling the truth. She could very well get married before Ju Hae-in. No one had the right to treat Hayeon poorly, because Ju Hae-in cared for her like a younger sister. Jinhan was proud of her, She had successfully completed her homework and managed everything on her own. Hayeon asked Oppa if it was time for him to go back to work, but he said he was working outside the office. Hayeon didn't understand what it meant to work outside the office. Joo-haeun explained she had kidnapped Jinhan to help her. Jinhan realized he would need to return to work soon, but Joo-haeun said it was good to take breaks sometimes. Thanks to her, he had a nice rest. Joo-haeun didn't understand why he was looking at her like that and wanted Hayeon to notice too. Hayeon realized Jinhan was kind to everyone. He seemed like the most noble person she had ever known. He wanted to help her when she was in a tough situation, but, at her request, let her solve the problem herself. Joo-haeun suggested that when they had free time, they could go to Jeju or somewhere else to have some fun. She had long dreamed of seeing spring there and knew a great restaurant that served sea urchins. Jinhan asked if maybe she wanted him to make a reservation for her at the resort. Joo-haeun was thrilled by Oppa's offer because she really wanted a private villa with a big pool. She immediately asked Hayeon if she wanted to go with her, since she had heard that Oppa would rent the villa. Although Jinhan thought Hayeon could have asked Taehan to do it, around Taehan, she tried to be polite and talk more to her brother-in-law, who had been very busy lately. But she couldn't keep asking her brother-in-law to fulfill her every whim. After all, she had to have a conscience. Joo-haeun was offended that Hayeon could say such things about her. Finally, the three of them were able to meet and chat about various topics. Hayeon still remembered that Hayeon liked Jinhan. She didn't want the girl to share all the details she had confided in her. Of course, these feelings had started back in middle school, so it could be called a childhood love. Although Jinhan clearly remembered her confession to him. By the way, Jinhan had told her back then that she should date someone her own age and bought her some strawberry milk. That was true. It happened when Hayeon was finishing middle school. He had said he appreciated her confession, but she should date guys her own age. He also got along well with her brother and considered Hayeon like a younger sister, since he had watched her grow up. He thought Hayeon was too young to have such strong feelings for him, understanding well what it meant to have a crush at that age. That was exactly how it was, Jinhan asked Hayeon. But now she denied it because she didn't want to admit she had been in love with him. Jinhan kept glancing around the house. He liked interiors with minimalist simplicity. Hayeon noticed his interest in her home's design, so she suggested he look around the whole house. The man thought it might be inconvenient, but happily agreed. Joo-haeun said they could leave, while she would lie down and rest for a bit. Jinhan looked around and said that even though a lot had changed since Sungwon used to live here, the house still felt warm and cozy. They stepped into a large room filled with work tools and an enormous number of jars containing different oils. Hayeon explained that this was her workspace. It used to be Sungwon's game room, but he took everything with him when he moved to Jeju, so she decided to set it up for herself. Jinhan studied the space where Hayeon created her fragrances with genuine interest, when suddenly his attention was caught by a set of numbered jars. He reached for one of them. Hayeon immediately said they were just failed samples, but to him, the scent was far too good to be considered a failure. Hayeon held out her wrist and suggested he evaluate the final version instead. Jinhan leaned in and closed his eyes to better identify the scent. He inhaled slowly and quietly said that it was a little different from what he had smelled the last time they met. He continued to hover near her wrist, breathing it in as if savoring the fragrance, thinking to himself that he still caught that sweet peach note from before. Only this time, it felt fresher. Hayeon froze at the unexpected sight in front of her. The moment felt far too intimate. Her heart started racing, and she felt her cheeks flush. Hayeon suddenly realized something. Was this room always this small? There was no one here except her and Jinhan oppa. He held onto Hayeon's hand for a long time, so she assumed he was just trying to figure out the scent and that she should calm down. But for some reason, she suddenly felt suffocated, and it made her uncomfortable. Hayeon tried to speak to him, wanting him to listen, but Jinhan beat her to it and asked what was hidden in this fragrance. Hayeon immediately answered that it was Turkish rose, with just a hint of bergamot and fresh mint. He really liked the scent. It was pleasant, like walking through a blooming garden. He imagined a gentle breeze flowing through a sunlit garden in full bloom. It was a scent you could enjoy forever. Hayeon looked at Jinhan with curiosity, because he was the only one who truly appreciated her talent for creating beautiful fragrances. She explained that she had attended a rose festival in France while studying perfumery, and she wanted to preserve those memories. That's why she created this unique fragrance, to remind her of the French garden she used to walk through on warm evenings. When she traveled, she always paid attention to things like the air, temperature, and humidity. She wanted to preserve those exact feelings and recreate the sense of the places she had been. Jinhan was surprised. It was the first time he had heard of capturing places through scent, so he asked how she did it. He looked at Hayeon carefully, and after a long pause, said that he was becoming greedy. Hayeon was confused. She didn't understand what he meant. Why was he suddenly speaking in riddles she had never heard before? Jinhan didn't explain anything further. He just silently looked at her, even though he could tell she felt uncomfortable. Unable to handle his gaze, Hayeon lowered her eyes to avoid meeting his. Joo-hae called out to Jinhan, saying it was time for them to leave. She had things to do, and he needed to get to work. Hayeon asked Joo-hae to wait because she wanted to treat her to some blueberry jam and even give her a few jars to take home. Jinhan didn't rush to leave Hayeon's house. He didn't feel like going to work at all. Spending time with her was much more pleasant. He seemed almost enchanted. For some reason, he couldn't forget the scent he had felt from Hayeon. The day came when Hayeon had to attend Cha-jae's mother's anniversary. She didn't want to go at all, and even the weather matched her mood. Surrounded by all those people, she felt uncomfortable, so she stayed quiet, simply observing the guests and listening to their conversations. Cha-jae acted as if everything between them was fine, like nothing had happened. Still, he avoided eye contact with Hayeon so he wouldn't trigger her emotions. He had been visiting her every day, begging her to help him. His mother had high expectations for this anniversary. Turning 60 only happens once, and he didn't want to ruin it because of their problems. Hayeon didn't come because of his persistence, but because she wanted to figure everything out. His mother spoke to her son, mentioning how difficult it was to book this place. Cheo didn't see it as a problem. His mother was turning 60, so of course everything had to be perfect. She noted how attentive he was, saying he was the only one who truly understood her feelings. Even though she seemed pleased with the celebration, when she looked at Hayeon, there was something hidden in her gaze. She practically burned Hayeon with her stare, but Hayeon tried to ignore it and focus on others. His mother asked if she liked the food, saying she looked upset. Hayeon replied that everything was delicious and she shouldn't worry. The mother told her to stop picking at her food and talk instead. She had been silent the whole time. Jael tried to explain, but she ignored him. They hadn't seen each other in a while, so why wasn't Hayeon talking? She always had that expression every time they met. She mentioned her friend's son had recently gotten married, and his wife was very sweet and attractive. They visited her every weekend, and their relationship was like mother and daughter. She wondered why she wasn't as lucky. Jael explained that Hayeon was usually quiet. Since when did she dislike quiet people? His mother believed women should be modest with elders, but within reason. They asked about her necklace, knowing it was a limited edition and hard to get. Was it a gift from her oppa? Hayeon had long felt their eyes fixed on the necklace. His mother wondered if it was really worth spending a lawyer's salary on it. Hayeon thought she would have preferred receiving an expensive bag, then said she bought it with her own money. The woman didn't care about her answer. She said it was disgraceful to demand gifts when a lawyer's salary couldn't cover all expenses, and no matter how much a woman earned, it wasn't something to brag about. What would others think if she spent money so recklessly? Jael's sister said not to worry. Her brother earned well. She even joked about quitting school and going into business like her brother, wondering why she worked so hard studying when she was already in her 3rd year with no results. She wondered if it was really that hard to sell inheritance and become rich. The mother didn't understand how she could compare government work to business. Watching them, Hayeon couldn't believe she once tried to build a relationship with this family. She used to feel afraid, thinking her lack of parents was her weakness. But now, it just seemed ridiculous. Jael said he needed to go to the restroom, leaving her alone with his mother and sister during this tense moment. As soon as he left, his mother began speaking rudely and without respect, asking if Hayeon had discussed their previous conversation with her brother. She suggested setting up an office for Jael in her brother's house to save on rent. Hayeon thought about it, but to her, the idea sounded completely absurd. The mother got irritated, not understanding why Hayeon found her suggestion unreasonable, since her brother had moved to Jeju anyway. He rarely came to Seoul, and Hayeon already had her own workspace, so she should convince her brother to give up the house. Hayeon was fed up. How could she ask for something like that so openly? The mother got offended, accusing Hayeon of being rude, while acting the same way herself, yet thinking she was educated and cultured. Hayeon reminded her that their parents left the house to them so they wouldn't lack anything. She couldn't make decisions alone or force her brother into anything, and she wouldn't. The mother argued that if Jael did well, she would too. Why should he work for others his whole life when he could run his own company? She criticized Hayeon for living comfortably in her brother's house, while Jael had to work hard. Once they got married, everything would be shared anyway. She even asked if Hayeon was offended by her words and whether she wasn't ashamed to behave like that in front of her future mother-in-law. Her daughter tried to stop her, but she ignored it. The mother told her daughter not to interfere if she didn't fully understand the situation. She ordered Hayeon to discuss the matter with her brother again, questioning why she stayed silent. When adults spoke to her, She had no right to show dissatisfaction. The woman raised her voice, saying Hayeon's parents clearly hadn't taught her properly. If she wanted to join their family, she would have to learn all their traditions. The father tried to stop her, saying she was behaving inappropriately, but she pushed him away and told him not to interfere. After a while, Jael returned, but the festive atmosphere at the table was gone. He asked what was going on, wondering if they came to argue instead of celebrating. His mother said nothing had happened. Hayeon had just been silent the whole time. She pretended to be hurt, saying she felt upset talking to herself because of Hayeon's silence. Then they heard a voice behind them. A girl announced her arrival. Jae was the most surprised, since it was meant to be a surprise for him. He didn't understand why she did it, because things could end badly for her. Hayeon was actually relieved. Now all the attention could shift from her to this poor girl. It was Lee Si-ho, smiling, completely unaware of what kind of family she was stepping into. Hayeon turned to Jael's mother and said she came here today to say something, but because of her pointless talk, she couldn't do it. She knew this news would shock everyone, so she couldn't bring herself to say it before. But now was the moment. She said that she and Jael had been over for a while. His mother couldn't believe it and thought Hayeon was just trying to get back at her. Today was supposed to be a happy day, and now she would never see this girl again. Hayeon decided to introduce them to her friend, the girl their son had been seeing for a long time. It was Lee Si-ho. The girl smiled sweetly at his mother and congratulated her again on her anniversary, saying the celebration was truly wonderful. His mother turned to her son, clearly unhappy with what Hayeon was saying, and asked who that girl sitting next to him was. The woman tried to stop Hayeon, but it was pointless. Hayeon had no desire to stay there anymore, realizing she didn't belong. After his workout, Jinhan took a shower, and now it was finally time for him to relax with a cup of tea. But what he saw made him change his plans. The tea could wait. He saw Hayeon walking out of the restaurant, with Jael running after her, trying to stop her. He didn't expect to see her today, but noticing she was in trouble, he wanted to find out what had happened. Jael grabbed her by the hand, asking why she was doing this and why Si-ho had come to the restaurant. He said it wasn't a reason to act like this. Why was she making things more complicated? Hayeon explained she just wanted to figure everything out. He said she could go back inside and explain everything to his mother herself, though he knew it wouldn't be easy. It might drive him crazy. Jinhan watched Hayeon and noticed her expression was completely different now, not the same one he saw at her house earlier. Jael questioned why she came at all if she was going to act like this. She shouldn't have come in the first place. He reminded her that he had been begging her to come to his mother's anniversary. Had she really broken her promise? It was the perfect chance to explain everything to his family. Jinhan thought this was the decisive moment for Hayeon. It was time to finally end this. Taeil wanted her to listen, but she kept interrupting him. Hayeon told him Si-ho was left alone inside. Shouldn't he go back to her? Jinhan realized that this guy had cheated on her. Jael was furious. Everything he had planned fell apart in just a few minutes. Out of frustration, he slammed his fist hard against the wall. He might lose control and hurt Hayeon. Jinhan was worried he might hit her, but Hayeon told him she wasn't afraid of him at all, so he shouldn't even try to intimidate her. She said his behavior was ridiculous. He blamed her for everything, even though he caused it all himself. Jinhan admired her strength. She was a real fighter, standing up for her dignity. But in his mind, he warned himself that if that bastard tried to scare her again, he would destroy him. Hayeon explained that the reason she cared so much about their relationship ending was because he had been her choice. She wanted to prove to herself she hadn't made a mistake. But she was wrong, and she regretted choosing him. Jael asked if she didn't think this was too much for such an important day. She should think about his mother. Considering everything, they should go back and apologize. His mother saw Hayeon as her own daughter, so she should show respect. Hayeon thought that was ridiculous. He hadn't heard what his mother said behind his back. She constantly judged her and looked for flaws. So should she really apologize when that woman demanded an office and even a house before the wedding? Jael was confused. Could his mother really say something like that? Hayeon confirmed she had said it repeatedly. He insisted it must be a misunderstanding. His mother would never do that. That made Hayeon angry, and she said they were both hypocrites. Hayeon said that woman was his mother, but to her, she was no one, so he shouldn't come to her anymore. The conversation was over. She was exhausted and wanted to go home, while he should go back and continue celebrating his mother's anniversary. Hayeon turned to leave, but then noticed Jinhan standing behind her. He might have heard everything. She was surprised to see him and didn't understand how he ended up there at that moment. She felt embarrassed and didn't know how she could explain all this to him. It didn't even make sense herself. Jinhan asked why she stayed at the restaurant so long when she said it would only take 5 minutes. Hayeon didn't understand what he meant at first, so she stayed silent. Jael angrily asked who he was and what he wanted. Jinhan replied he could ask him the same. Who was he, and why was he raising his voice at Hayeon? Jaeon said he was the man who would soon become her husband. Hayeon thought he couldn't be serious. Apparently, he hadn't learned anything last time, even though Jinhan shouldn't interfere. This whole situation was insane. But when Jinhan asked her if it was true, she said no. Jinhan told Jaeon that she clearly didn't feel the same. How could he force a woman to marry him if she didn't want to? Was he that desperate? When Jinhan addressed him as lawyer Cha Jaeol, he was surprised. Did he know him? Maybe he had been his client, or was also a lawyer. He felt like he had seen him somewhere before. Jinhan handed him his business card, and then Jaeol realized who he was. He was the CEO of a hotel, the same man he had seen near Hayeon's house. Jaeol apologized, saying he didn't know who he was. He added that he had a lot to do and needed to leave. Jinhan pointed at the wall and said there was a lot of dust after he hit it, so something should be done about it. Jaeol didn't understand what he meant. Was he just trying to mock him? Jinhan smiled and said there was a lot of dust in the air, so he should hurry. It wasn't good to breathe polluted air. That was enough. Jinhan and Hayeon needed to leave, so if there was nothing else, they could say goodbye. But he gave him one warning. If other guests complained, they would have to call security. Jaeol didn't understand where he came from or why he was threatening him. The CEO and Hayeon, what kind of relationship did they have? He couldn't figure out how Hayeon even met him. Maybe they were already involved while she was still with him. Maybe she cheated too. But whatever their relationship was, it wasn't his business anymore. He shouldn't create more conflict or get involved. A woman who came out of the restaurant called out to him, telling him to hurry. His mother had caused a scene. Then she asked who that woman was, wondering if he had been seeing her at the hotel. Jaeol asked what happened, but didn't want to explain anything to her. His mother was on the verge of fainting. Why the hell was she even here if she had already left them? It was time. If anything happened, there was medical staff nearby for emergencies. Jaeol thanked him for the information. The woman kept asking who that man was and what they talked about. Jaeol, irritated, told her to shut up. Hayeon asked Jinhan what that was and why he suddenly showed up. He acted like he didn't understand what she meant. He said it was his property, his building, so of course he would be there. But then he realized that wasn't what she meant. She smiled, saying it didn't matter anymore. Still, she wondered why he always appeared at such inconvenient moments. He said he just knew where to find her. But he didn't understand why she was acting so strange. Hayeon insisted he was imagining things. She said there was no need to create awkward situations. She didn't like making a scene or arguing. Jinhan understood, since he didn't like that either. Why was he so persistent, always trying to support her, even when he didn't know the full story? Hayeon was exhausted, but she had to pull herself together. Jinhan thought that when someone helps you, you should at least thank them. She sincerely thanked him for his help. Jinhan smiled and said it was easy to do, and added that he wouldn't tell someone anything. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder and said they could leave now. He would walk her home. But first, they needed to do something. She didn't understand what he meant or where he was taking her. Jinhan didn't explain. He just said they were going somewhere, and she would be pleasantly surprised. Hayeon was amazed by the interior of the place. She had never been somewhere like this before, and even her fatigue seemed to disappear. It was a luxurious spot. They had come to the hotel's bar, although she had no idea why. Jinhan brought her there because she kept her word and completed what she had to do. So this was her reward. But what if people showed up at the bar? Jinhan assured her that wouldn't happen. It only opened at 6 p.m., and until then, they would be alone. Hayeon thought he had brought her here on purpose. Jinhan wanted to celebrate this happy moment with her. She didn't mind his offer, but it felt too luxurious, and she didn't think she could accept his generosity. Jinhan asked what she wanted to drink. Hayeon didn't know, so she told him to choose something he liked. It didn't matter to her. He asked if it could be alcoholic. Hayeon felt uneasy, but she wasn't the type to get drunk after a breakup. If she didn't want alcohol, he could offer delicious non-alcoholic drinks that were just as good. Hayeon noticed all the drinks in his bar were very expensive, so she decided she would only have one glass. But how could one glass turn into a whole bottle? Jinhan remembered she said she didn't know how to drink. Then she could just enjoy the aroma. They really were nice. Actually, that wasn't true. She could drink. It's just that sometimes she couldn't stop. He didn't understand how that was possible. It seemed like Ji Sung-won's little sister got drunk very easily. Even just dipping chopsticks in soju would do it. She could drink, though he wasn't asking her to get drunk, just to try one glass. Hayeon thought it would be rude to refuse such a persistent offer, so she decided to try a light absinthe. Hayeon asked Jinhan if he liked alcohol, since she had never met anyone who didn't. Jinhan didn't see why she needed to know. Sometimes he allowed himself a glass to relax and take his mind off work. Hayeon thought to herself that maybe this wasn't her place to unwind. She was an adult, though, and allowed to drink. Jinhan admitted to himself again, despite all the time that had passed, some things hadn't changed at all. Hayeon wondered where he had learned all this. Jinhan said he had a talented friend who taught him how to make complex cocktails. Was that the same friend who worked in agriculture on Jeju? When her brother ran a bar, he said Jinhan helped boost his sales. Jinhan absorbed information quickly and memorized drinks one by one, so sometimes he treated himself to different cocktails. As he prepared the drink, he looked completely different, like he was doing something outside his usual role. He asked how she thought he looked. Hayeon didn't know how to say it. It just felt unusual. Jinhan smiled and reminded her he had simply grown up since they last saw each other. To her, he seemed more mature than before. It felt strange, and she didn't understand what she was feeling. Hayeon noticed how well he made the cocktail and thought she should try it. But first, she thanked him for caring and for keeping her company that evening. It looked beautiful, and she couldn't resist taking a sip. Jinhan wanted her opinion. To Hayeon, it tasted amazing. She couldn't understand how he learned it just by watching her brother. After the first sip, she felt much lighter, like the tension melted away. Wasn't it amazing how the green liquor turned white after a while? It reminded her of how quickly people's thoughts could change. Jinhan disagreed. Some things never change. And Hayeon couldn't argue with that. Even though she had pleasant company and Jinhan cared about her, she still felt lonely for some reason. Jinhan noticed she still felt tense, so he behaved carefully, not wanting her to feel uncomfortable. Hayeon had heard green was the color of jealousy, but she wasn't jealous of anyone, and didn't want Jinhan to think she was. She said she was fine, but in reality, she wasn't, and Jinhan understood that perfectly. She realized Jinhan had figured out how deeply she was hurt by the breakup. Maybe that's why he chose absinthe. It matched her emotional state. Today had been the most pleasant day since she turned 20. Her overdue homework was finally done. Unexpectedly, Jinhan gently stroked her hand. It felt like a gesture of tenderness and care. She got flustered. Did she really look that foolish? Like someone who didn't respect herself? But Jinhan said she did well. She should be a little braver, say what she really felt, but without causing a scene. He was surprised by her patience. She had waited so long for the right moment to say everything. Hayeon asked what this was, since his actions were different from before. Jinhan said it was a reward she deserved. Didn't she feel better now? Hayeon remembered hearing while studying abroad that absinthe was Vincent van Gogh's favorite drink. But why did he love it so much? Maybe it was addiction. Maybe he just couldn't stop drinking it. Hayeon looked at Jinhan and noticed how calm he was, so different from Cha Jaeon. She wondered if Van Gogh ever managed to overcome his addiction, or if he drank so much because he was lonely. She had read that absinthism was a side effect of absinthe, related to alcoholism and addiction. But alcohol seemed to ease pain. Maybe that's why, for some people, alcohol tasted good. But instead of getting drunk, Jinhan enjoyed the atmosphere of drinking. That was true. When people share a glass of wine, they talk and learn new things about each other. It helps them understand one another better. It's not easy to find someone you truly enjoy talking to. When Hayeon met someone, she wanted to know everything about them, not out of curiosity, but something deeper. Sometimes she did it out of interest, though, and in the process of meeting people, she felt like part of society. Conversations made her happy. But the older she got, the harder it became to find the right person. And that made her sad. Maybe she had already lost someone who made her feel good, and now all she felt was sadness. But when she drank, her fears and insecurities disappeared. Even if she'd regret it the next day, in that moment, she felt brave. Still, she only drank when she felt sad and lonely. Hayeon felt light. Her body relaxed, her mind empty, as if her problems had vanished. She looked up and noticed the ceiling. It was unfamiliar, and she tried to understand what was going on. The first thing she wondered was where she was. She had never seen a place like this. She tried to get up, but her head felt heavy, the effect of the absinthe. Her head hurt badly, so she lay back down to avoid making it worse. She looked around, trying to figure out where she was and how she got there. It definitely wasn't her home. There were many possibilities, but she couldn't remember anything. It looked like a luxury hotel suite, but she didn't remember how she ended up there, though she suspected Jinhan might have arranged it. Then she stopped herself. Jinhan should be somewhere nearby. But she realized she was alone in the room. Hayeon sat in an empty room, unable to understand what was going on, and she couldn't remember what had happened. She called out for Jinhan Oppa, but he didn't respond. She thought he wasn't there, and honestly, that felt like a relief. But one question kept echoing in her mind. How did she end up here? Had she really blacked out, and Jinhan brought her here himself? She tried to recall everything, step by step, and the first thing she remembered was drinking at the bar with Ryu Jinhan. He asked if she knew a drink called Kir Royale. She knew it well. It almost seemed like she hadn't studied in Paris, but just drank. What was he even talking about? She had dedicated her whole life to studying. Jinhan thought she was ambitious, and he was probably about 5 years older than her brother. He said she was in her 20s, while he was in his 30s. Hayeon noticed he looked really good for his age. What a day. She was drinking with a 34-year-old man. He realized that at some point, his perception of Hayeon had changed. She wasn't the same girl she used to be as a child. She didn't understand how he could be so blunt. What was wrong with having ambition? Jinhan thought that in such a short time, they had already gone through a lot together. Not long ago, things were awkward between them, but now, it was actually nice that they got along. He usually made drinks whenever he invited someone on a date, but for Hayeon, he prepared only the best. Hayeon was already tipsy from the cocktails, so she started seeing things differently. It felt like Jinhan was flirting with her. He looked mature and relaxed, like he had no problems at all and everything in his life was going according to plan. Hayeon finally felt at peace. She let go of everything and just enjoyed the moment. Now she wanted something special. Jinhan said she should be asking her boyfriend for that. It had nothing to do with him. He said he should only act like a gentleman with his own girlfriend, not try to get other girls drunk. Still, he understood, and she could drink what he offered. The cocktails were delicious, and some she tried for the first time. But drinking alone felt boring. Jinhan asked if she wanted him to drink with her. Hayeon thought it was a good idea, but wasn't sure if he could. He wondered if there was any reason to refuse. He wasn't planning to drink alone anyway. He still had to take her home. There was nothing suspicious in his thoughts about her. He just wanted to cheer her up, knowing how hard it is to go through a breakup alone. But if Hayeon wanted company, he would gladly join her, just without overdoing it. Hayeon noticed he poured himself whiskey and wondered if he actually liked it. Jinhan didn't really care for alcohol, so it didn't matter what he drank. If he didn't like whiskey, why had he already had 2 glasses and still showed no signs of it? Jinhan used to drink a lot when he worked. Hayeon wondered if that was his way of coping with stress. He was human too, though for some reason she wasn't always sure about that, which made her curious about his life outside of work. Hayeon thought anyone would get drunk from 2 glasses of cognac, but he seemed used to it. She wondered if people often told him he was perfect. They probably did, but no one is truly perfect. As for him, he never even blushed when he drank. Maybe Jinhan wanted to make a bet who would blush first. Even though he didn't have that weakness, she still wanted to try. Whoever blushed first would have to grant the other's wish. And only then did she realize it might not have been the best idea. But what happened next, she couldn't remember. She even hit her head lightly, trying to force herself to recall. Then she remembered. A very expensive bottle of champagne somehow appeared. She noticed medicine and a note on the bedside table. It was clear Jinhan left them for her, showing his care. She picked up an envelope and couldn't understand what he was or why he left it. She pulled out a sheet of paper, thinking it was a brochure, but it turned out to be a contract. It described a private event on Jeju, with preparation starting in 2 months. The winner would be chosen by voting, and the company would offer special benefits. At first, she didn't understand, but after rereading it, she found it interesting and didn't want to reject it right away. Her head started hurting again, so she decided to take the medicine Jinhan left. The pain was strong, so she thought taking a few pills would help faster. Because of the headache, she couldn't even tell what time it was. It felt like she was lost in time and didn't know where to go. She saw several missed calls from Younghyun Unni, so she decided to call back, worried something happened at the shop. Younghyun couldn't reach her and told her to come to Kipi immediately if she was free. It was a terrible day. Hayeon didn't understand why her perfume smelled so strong. It used to feel light and barely noticeable. When she arrived at the shop, she saw Younghyun sitting outside, with a huge hole in the glass behind her. Hayeon asked what happened. Why was the glass broken? Was it a robbery attempt or someone trying to sabotage their business? Lee Si-ho had drunk too much and tried to break into the shop. She threw a stone to get inside, grabbed her sweater, and started yelling. Myunghan was asleep when security called about the break-in. She tried to calm Si-ho down, but it only made things worse. She asked if Hayeon knew what Cha Jae-yeol had done. After she left, he started shouting for her, then even hit Si-ho a few times, stopping only when she threatened to call the police. Hayeon looked at Si-ho, who seemed confused and unstable, and wondered if she had something to say. Si-ho asked why Hayeon always acted like she was better than her. She saw no difference between them. If Hayeon took Jaeyeon from her, she would destroy her business. Then came more accusations and threats, completely unfair. Siho blamed Hayeon for everything, even though she knew it wasn't her fault. Myunghyun asked Hayeon where she had been and why she didn't answer her calls. Hayeon didn't know what to say, so she just said she had some work. In reality, she had lunch with Jaeyo's family. Siho showed up too, even though everyone thought she was out of her mind. Hayeon admitted that she invited her herself so she could be there too, but things didn't go as planned. Myunghyun was shocked. So Jaeyeon really cheated on Hayeon with Siho? Siho finally felt ashamed, since she knew from the start he was taken and planning to marry her friend. Siho tried to justify herself, saying it wasn't easy for her either. But why should she stay in second place? She couldn't stand it. She drank an entire bottle of soju, passed out, then woke up and threw up. The girls joked that now the truth had finally come out. Siho calmed down a little, thinking she had sobered up and could act more reasonably. Hayeon noticed she was calmer and suggested they talk peacefully, and Siho agreed. But soon, Siho started trembling and crying again. She was nervous, still wanting to be with Jaeyeon, even though she knew it was wrong. She started yelling at Hayeon again, asking why she was still involved. It was none of her business anymore. Hayeon didn't demand anything from her. But after everything she did to the shop, did she really feel better now? That mysterious smile of his only showed up when he was sure he would win. But Hayeon had no idea what kind of wish he might have. Their eyes kept meeting, and unlike hers, his gaze was bright and confident. Their looks felt almost tangible, like soft touches across the distance between them. His next cocktail was just as refined as the others, like something made by a bartender at a high-end club. Jinhan wanted to impress her with his skills, and he liked that he could satisfy her taste. Finally, he made her favorite, Kir Royale, and she got to taste the authentic flavor. The strange atmosphere and lingering emotions made it hard to fully give in to their feelings, even though they had been drawn to each other for a while. But in that moment, everything was filled with laughter and fun. The alcohol helped her relax and be herself. If she couldn't remember anything, it probably meant she lost the bet to Jinhan. But why did her head hurt so much if she hadn't drunk that much? Lee Siho tried to prove that Hayeon was the one who told her to come to the anniversary, and that she just wanted to make her look like a fool in front of Cha Jaeol's family. Wasn't she ashamed of that? But Hayeon insisted that she was the one who called Siho because she wanted to tell everything, saying she had been depressed. Of course that was true. If Hayeon and Jaeol got married, Siho would no longer be needed, and the two of them would just laugh at her. Hayeon should have told them everything from the start, because she was the real victim. Hayeon couldn't understand why Siho was blaming others now. She brought all these problems on herself, and now had to take responsibility. When Hayeon said she broke up with that jerk, Siho thought she was lying again. But she said it right in front of her, though after everything, he still ran after Hayeon. Siho believed Hayeon said one thing, but reality was completely different. Hayeon repeated that it was over with Jaeyeon, and since everything was caught on camera, she would have to deal with it now. Siho thought they should handle it legally, not based on Hayeon's opinion. Hayeon knew that Siho always hated people who had something she never did. She realized she shouldn't tolerate this anymore, agreed with Siho, and wanted to end it all. Siho said she could quit the shop if that's what Hayeon wanted, but she couldn't just leave empty-handed. After all, she contributed to Kippy's success too. Hayeon was shocked by her audacity. Did she really expect a share? And she noticed that Siho hadn't even tried to think this through. They worked together, so it made sense she wanted her share, but clearly, she didn't understand something. Hayeon explained that Kippy's success was the result of her and Myunghyun's work. Maybe Siho managed social media, but the company's reputation came from their perfumes. All the expenses were paid by Hayeon. Siho joined them without contributing anything significant, and Hayeon was the one paying her salary. Siho couldn't accept that. They really thought Kippy succeeded without her, even though she put in effort too. Hayeon insisted her efforts were minimal. The company belonged only to her and Myunghyun. Siho had nothing to do with it from the start. Everyone understood Siho was in a bad emotional state, so Hayeon decided to support her future plans, but told her not to come to the shop tomorrow. Furious, Siho said Hayeon was proud of achieving everything on her own, without her parents' help. But no matter what, she would always be an orphan. She couldn't see anything good in Hayeon's success. Myunghyun couldn't take her arrogance anymore and wanted to hit her. Siho didn't understand why things had turned physical. The shop was a mess. Glass scattered everywhere, and the smell of perfume filled the air. Myunghyun told Hayeon to calm down. She wouldn't be able to fix everything right away, since it would take a lot of money. Hayeon suggested closing the shop tomorrow and taking a break. They had the resources for repairs, and she wanted to redesign everything in a Baroque style. If they had known this would happen, they could have accepted the hotel's offer earlier. And honestly, they probably should now. But everyone remembered that Hayeon previously rejected that idea, saying she didn't like it and didn't want to change anything. She explained they already had too much work and didn't want to increase the workload. They were already working full-time and overtime. Thinking about it, Hayeon had worked nonstop for almost a year and a half. Things were going well, so a break wouldn't hurt. In fact, it could be a chance to move forward. Hayeon decided that if Unni believed in it, she would handle it herself and make it work. Myunghyun didn't expect that and thought Hayeon was acting impulsively. When the offer was first made, it didn't seem like the right time. But maybe everything was happening the way it was supposed to. Myunghyun was so happy she hugged Hayeon. She couldn't believe Hayeon had finally come to her senses and agreed. If Sunny was ready, then she was too. If they committed to this, they could definitely take first place. They would need to go to Jeju for 2 months, from April to June, which sounded like a perfect chance to recharge. They would focus on expanding the shop, while Hayeon would travel to Seoul to oversee construction. Their crisis was starting to look like an opportunity. Maybe everything that happened wasn't just a coincidence. Jinhan remembered that Hayeon initially rejected his offer, saying she was too busy. Now she thought they should meet, so he asked to confirm the date and time. A whole week passed after that conversation, but no details were set, so he started to worry. She went to France during a difficult time, so he assumed her tastes developed there and booked a table at a French restaurant. Jinhan wasn't sure if she would like the food, so he hesitated when the waiter asked where to begin. He decided to start with an aperitif, and the waiter suggested a glass of champagne. Jinhan didn't think he'd ever want to drink champagne again, but the waiter understood. Before the meeting, Jinhan felt unusually nervous, something he had never experienced before. Hayeon, however, preferred champagne and didn't even consider refusing it. She asked why he wasn't dating anyone, though at first, Jinhan didn't realize she meant him. She wondered why a man like him didn't have a fiancé. He was handsome, successful, and composed. While she sipped champagne, he thought about how to answer. He didn't know how to explain why he had no real relationships with women. Instead, he asked if she liked the champagne at the restaurant. She thought she was already tipsy after a few sips, but the champagne had no taste. Jinhan smiled and admitted it was just water. Hayeon asked why he did that. Jinhan didn't understand why she wanted an answer if she wouldn't remember it anyway. Jinhan was perfectly fine with his life and never felt the need for a partner or family. Hayeon figured he'd say that. He had everything, so there was nothing to regret. He was talented, from a good family, and attractive. But Hayeon also had good manners, something she hadn't mentioned before. Jinhan thought she might be a little crazy. He said he didn't want to be tied down. Hayeon didn't think much about relationships either, but she was curious why he had broken off 2 engagements. Maybe there were reasons, and if it wasn't a secret, he could tell her. The first woman wanted to study, so he supported her. The second fell in love with someone else. Hayeon thought he was unlucky, though he never saw it that way. Still, it was strange. He had never had a serious relationship, even though 2 marriages never happened. While talking, Jinhan tried to touch her leg under the table, pretending it was accidental. Hayeon took it seriously, but Jinhan was already tired of discussing his personal life. He just wanted her to come back to her senses. He felt like he had finally found his goal, while she insisted she wasn't drunk at all. Jinhan noticed her face flushed first, which meant she lost again. Hayeon loved when he touched her face. It made her feel relaxed and comforted. She miscalculated her limits again and passed out quickly. Jinhan tried to wake her, but she just mumbled softly. He called her, but she didn't respond. Had she really passed out again before they could talk? She was fast asleep, and Jinhan felt disappointed. He had been ready to claim his wish. Jinhan was informed that representatives from Kippy had arrived and were waiting to meet him. He immediately wanted to see them. He had been waiting for this meeting for a long time and was glad they finally agreed to work with him. Jinhan greeted Lee Myung-hyun, and she was pleased that he remembered her name. She thanked him for making time for them, since they both knew he had a lot on his plate. He introduced himself, saying his name was Ryu Jinhan and that he was Chi Hayeon's director. The girl smiled, liking Jinhan's joke, and decided to play along by introducing herself as well. The director said he had been waiting for them for quite a while. His smile was stunning. He instantly charmed both girls. He thanked them for reaching out to him. Hayeon felt more relaxed now and was finally able to look him in the eyes without looking away or feeling uncomfortable. Myunghyun was curious about what the winner would receive, and Jinhan replied that if they won, they would definitely find out. She was surprised. Was it really such a big secret? Knowing the prize could boost competition. She also wanted to know how the housing situation would be handled. Jinhan explained that all participants would be provided with free accommodation, but only the winning company would receive the prize money. Was he really able to provide free housing for everyone? Myunghyun was once again convinced that he was incredibly wealthy and not stingy at all. She hoped Kippy's reputation would continue to grow. In fact, they were planning to take a summer break so they could fully dedicate themselves to the competition and winning it. For Ji Hayeon, summer meant her birthday, and at the same time, the loss of something very precious. All he wanted was to make her smile again while she spent time in Jeju. Hayeon felt touched by how attentive and caring Jinhan was. No one had ever treated her like that except her brother. Even though Jinhan had a lot of responsibilities and plans, he hoped this would turn out to be the best summer yet. The CEO was concerned that Director Ji didn't get any vacation at all. Maybe she should buy some medicine, since it looked like she'd have to work really hard. Hayeon promised to work as hard as she could, and Myunghyun believed her, knowing that she hated losing. Hayeon was also curious about what exactly the winner would receive if they won the competition. Throughout the conversation, Jinhan couldn't take his eyes off Hayeon. It seemed like he was genuinely interested in her and was subtly encouraging her to join his project. At first, Hayeon didn't notice, but then she realized he was looking at her and started wondering how long he had been doing that. Why was he smiling at her so warmly? Sure, they had grown closer after drinking together, but not enough to show it in public. At first, she ignored it, but then she started feeling uncomfortable, worried that Myunghyun might notice and jump to conclusions. She was happy they were spending time together, but anything more than that was out of the question. Right now, Hayeon didn't want to show her feelings in public, let alone discuss them with anyone, so she was really anxious about it. Even though they would have to work in Jeju, it shouldn't stop them from enjoying themselves at the resort. Restaurants, fitness activities, everything would be available in their free time. Myunghyun was thrilled about this opportunity. Even though they'd have to work hard, Jinhan promised to maintain a balance between work and rest. Myunghyun smiled and assured him they definitely wouldn't refuse a day off. Hayeon noticed that her friend wasn't thinking about responsibility at all. In Jeju, they needed to be careful not to overdo it. If the weather got too hot, they shouldn't forget to take breaks. At that time, Jeju had bright blue skies, clean air, and lush greenery in bloom. There would be plenty for them to enjoy. Jinhan hoped it would inspire them, since inspiration was essential for their work. Myunghyun was surprised. Did the director offer this to everyone? Jinhan confirmed, saying they wanted the best companies to participate. But among all of them, Kippy stood out, which meant they had certain advantages that could influence the competition's outcome. While Myunghyun didn't understand why their company was treated so specially, Hayeon felt grateful hearing those words. It meant a lot to her, since she had poured so much time and effort into the company. For Jinhan, this moment was emotional as well. Back then and even now, that fragrance continued to amaze and captivate. It was something unique that belonged only to Hayeon. After the meeting, Myunghyun had mixed feelings. She thought it might be dangerous. No matter how you looked at it, Ryu Jinhan seemed a bit cunning. She noticed his laugh, but couldn't quite figure out what exactly bothered her about it. After thinking it over, she concluded that his laugh felt almost seductive. Hayeon wanted to know why she would think something like that. Didn't Hayeon notice how much he smiled? Why did his smile feel so tempting? Jinhan was simply attractive, but Hayeon thought her friend was overthinking again. Still, deep down, she knew her friend was right. It was impossible not to notice. His gaze also made her uneasy, stirring emotions that made it hard for her to focus. Hayeon tried to convince herself it meant nothing, and that she should focus on what truly mattered to her. Oppa was just interested in the fragrance she used. There was nothing strange about their tastes aligning. Myunghyun asked if everything was okay, since she noticed Jinhan looking at her in a strange way. Hayeon reassured her that he was just naturally friendly and smiled at everyone. Her friend wasn't easy to fool. She sensed something unusual between them and asked directly. But Hayeon's answer sounded odd. Hayeon didn't want to talk about it anymore, but her friend insisted something was definitely off. He said something softly and looked at Hayeon in a way that clearly showed he wanted her attention. At one point, Myunghyun imagined what it would be like to date him, and for a brief moment, she felt happy. Hayeon didn't understand what she was thinking. They were there for work. Her friend insisted he was incredibly handsome. You could only imagine working with him and seeing him every day. His smile and gaze were so dangerously captivating that it was impossible to ignore. Taejeol didn't even come close. He was completely different from Ryu Jinhan. Hayeon was tired of these conversations. Her friend had gone too far. Myunghyun noticed she was upset and apologized. Still, she couldn't calm down and kept wondering why Jinhan wasn't married yet. Hayeon thought he simply wasn't interested in love and was satisfied with his life as it was. But her thoughts did match her words. Deep down, she had plenty of wild ideas. If he owned such a huge hotel, didn't he ever invite someone over for the night? Myunghyun didn't even realize she had started feeling jealous, to the point where she almost wanted to cry, wishing she could be that lucky. Hayeon was sure Jinhan wasn't the type to entertain himself like that in his own hotel, especially with employees around. Someone who owned a hotel like that would naturally seem special to everyone, especially to young women. Myunghyun suggested they stop focusing on director Jinhan and instead put all their effort into the project and winning the grand prize. And once they won, she joked she'd claim director Ryu Jinhan for herself. Hayeon couldn't understand why her friend was saying such nonsense. They were there to make money, not get married. They just had to do their best, and everything would work out. Hayeon explained that Jinhan, her brother, and she had been close friends since childhood. Myunghyun thought that was great. They shared a past. Wasn't that important? Besides, he was as sweet as honey. All they had to do was wait, and Hayeon would see that Myunghyun was never wrong. And who knew how true that would turn out to be? Because after some time, her words proved to be completely true. Everything happened just as her friend had said, and she insisted Hayeon would thank her for it. Jinhan and Hayeon's work in Jeju was just beginning, so the girls were determined and confident as they set their sights on winning. There were quite a few companies participating in the competition, so first they had to gather everyone together to share the general information about the event. Everyone was welcomed and informed that the group leader, Ju Do-hwan, would be in charge of the project. The concept of the project, Stories in the Garden, was a festival that anyone could enjoy. There were 6 teams in total, and the company that received the most feedback would become the winner. Invited VIP guests would take part in the event. They would vote for the fragrance they liked the most, but of course, the winner wouldn't be announced that same day. Someone from the audience immediately asked about the fragrances they had submitted in advance. Ju Do-hwan replied that it would be used as a marketing strategy. They would hand out numbered t-shirts to visitors. Once people fully experienced the scents, they would return the shirts at the end of the event. After that, they would need to write down the number of the perfume they liked the most. Based on this data, the company would organize matching pairs. Hayeon was excited because the project was much bigger than she had expected, which made it even more interesting. In today's world, perfume had become a way to attract attention from others. All they needed to do was create 3 different types of fragrances. Ju Do-hwan warned participants to take this seriously and create scents so captivating they could make people dizzy. And then choose one signature fragrance to represent their company. After that, there was a discussion, and the main topic was how to choose a signature scent that would feel unique and not like something from the mass market. As everyone understood, they would be staying at the hotel for 2 months. So first, they needed to get to know each other. A man introduced himself as Lee Mo-tep from the company Imhotep. The girl sitting next to him introduced herself as Yoon Han-sol from La Parfum. Kim Yu was from the company ZZ. A pretty but very young girl named Woo Arom was from the company Arom, which operated under a family brand. Another young man, very handsome at first glance, introduced himself as Wook Do-hyun from the company Wook Code. Now it was Hayeon's turn to introduce her company. She said her name and mentioned that the girl next to her was her partner, Myunghyun. Yoon Han-sol suggested they simply choose one of the existing fragrances, and Lee Mo-tep immediately supported her, thinking it was a good idea. There were many scents: citrus, floral, woody, and so on. The guy thought it would be easy to just pick 6 favorites since it seemed simple. Maybe someone disagreed? Wook Do-hyun suggested coming up with more ideas. Having 1 scent per company was good, but shouldn't they also consider what the public actually liked? Wouldn't it be better to use each company's strengths? Everyone agreed. It made sense. Hayeon made a suggestion. Why not do it by countries? She thought it would be great to choose scents that represented different places. For example, sandalwood could represent India, and violet was strongly associated with Greece. It was a great idea, since every country had its own unique scent. Wook Do-hyun didn't understand how she planned to do that, since the scents needed to be combined in a way that they wouldn't overpower each other. Then Myunghyun spoke up, and he was surprised, since he didn't even notice her introducing herself earlier. But they didn't have much time. Even if they started right now, they might not finish everything. Hadn't they already worked enough for 1 day? Once they made a decision, there would be no turning back, so they needed to vote right away. Wook Do-hyun thought the idea was foolish from the start. There was no need to waste time creating something new when each company already had its own unique scents. Myunghyun believed it was the best decision, and everyone would agree. If he didn't like it, he was free to leave the project. Everyone agreed it was the right move, so they decided to go with it. Hayeon looked at her Unni, not understanding why she seemed so irritated. Wook Dae-hyun felt like a few people had already made the decision, so he turned to Derek. But Derek said they were all there to discuss the project, though they shouldn't forget they were also competitors. That was exactly why they were holding the meeting, to keep the competition fair. And it wasn't just Myung-hyun's opinion, but everyone's in the room. If Dae-hyun didn't like it, he could leave. And if he found a better, fair solution, he should let them know. Now they would choose countries randomly, but first they asked if anyone had any questions or objections. Kim Yoo asked who would go first, and suggested they could play rock, paper, scissors. Everyone was told to raise their hands above their heads and let fate decide who would go first. Wook Dae-hyun was annoyed and thought it was childish, but he had no choice but to go along with the majority. Otherwise, he'd have to leave the project. Even though Jinhan had promised to maintain a balance between work and rest, the schedule turned out to be much tighter than expected. Still, they never allowed themselves to skip breakfast. The girls wished each other a good meal, but Myung-hyun's appetite was already ruined by what she saw. Why did he come to the cafeteria at the exact same time as them? Maybe it was a coincidence, but Myung-hyun thought he did it on purpose. It was that arrogant young guy, Wook Dae-hyun. It was obvious he had a difficult personality and couldn't stay silent when he should, always trying to prove his importance. He was 26 years old, and his company had 10 employees, making it slightly bigger than theirs. For his age, he seemed very mature and responsible, but for some reason, he rarely smiled. Hayeon asked Myung-hyun why she hated him so much and if she knew him. The girl said they had met before. Hayeon was genuinely surprised and curious where they could have met. Myung-hyun said it was 5 years ago, when he was still in college. Hayeon realized he wasn't really her type and asked how long they had dated. Myung-hyun admitted he was completely different back then, and they had been together for a year. They had dated longer than Hayeon expected. Myung-hyun broke up with him when he went to the army, since she couldn't wait for him while still being in high school. Now it made sense why they acted so strangely. But things weren't like that anymore, and Myung-hyun wasn't going to waste her nerves on him, even if it seemed like she got upset whenever she saw him. She just didn't expect to see him again. Hayeon thought maybe it was fate, though Myung-hyun hoped it wasn't, and wanted to return to Seoul as soon as possible. She had really wanted to come to Jeju, but now that she'd run into him, she didn't feel like it anymore. There was still 1 month and 3 weeks left before they could return to Seoul. Then, Hayeon realized how fast time was flying. It had already been a week. Despite expectations, they had to work a lot here. Many people complained about the intense schedule, but they just needed to get used to it. When the environment changes, it takes time to adjust. Everyone was freaking out, saying they had been deceived. What was the point of saying there was a pool if there wasn't one? But at least all participants were given private houses, as promised. Then Derek approached the girls. He had also come early for breakfast because he preferred a quieter atmosphere. He politely greeted them and asked if he could sit with them, since eating alone was boring. The girls noticed that Derek looked like an English nobleman who had lived in Korea for a long time. He commented that Myung-hyun seemed patriotic, even in her food choices. She believed Korean cuisine was the best in the world. He asked if he remembered correctly that their company, Kippy, had been assigned to create the scent of Italy. The girls confirmed, specifically the scent of a Roman rose. Derek noted that a rose was as dangerous as it was beautiful. He asked if they had finished their work. Hayeon said they had tried many things, but nothing worked yet, and like everyone else, they were running out of time. Other teams had issues with workspace, so Derek asked how they were doing. Hayeon said they had the same problem. Other companies had already taken the available studios. There was one shared workshop at the resort, but it was mostly used like a relaxation villa. Different companies had different budgets for renting studios. If the girls didn't mind, they could use his workshop, since he mostly worked at night, leaving it free during the day. If it worked for them, they could use it all day. Hayeon and Myung-hyun were very grateful to Derek for his help. They got so caught up talking to their new acquaintance that they didn't notice Wook Dae-hyun standing nearby, who also came to have breakfast. Derek seemed very friendly, so he invited Wook Dae-hyun to join them, since eating alone was boring. Myung-hyun immediately said no, not understanding why he should sit with them. Confused, asked why she was so categorical. Derek thought they could get to know each other better, since they were creative people first, and only competitors second. Wook Dae-hyun looked at her, and from her expression he immediately understood they would never sit at the same table. She had made up her mind. Jinhan didn't want to create a situation that would require explanations from him, so he decided to accept Derek's offer and sit next to them. Myung-hyun lowered her eyes. She didn't want to meet Dae-hyun's gaze because she might lose control and say something she'd regret. The atmosphere at the table was tense, and the conversation came to a halt for a while. It seemed like only Derek didn't understand what was really going on. For Myung-hyun, Dae-hyun's presence was unbearable, and she lost her appetite, so she decided to leave. The guy didn't want her to go and suggested she at least finish her meal. Myunghyun gave him a sharp look. She didn't like that he was pushing his opinion on her. She could decide for herself what to do with her breakfast. Without any explanation, she left. Hayeon understood her decision and didn't try to stop her, though she was curious about what had actually happened between them. Of course, now wasn't the time to figure it out. Myunghyun was too emotional and wouldn't want to talk about it anyway. Near the private house where Hayeon was staying, a special guest was already waiting for her. When she stepped outside, she saw it was Suho. He said she wasn't in a hurry at all, but honestly, he didn't expect anything different. Hayeon pointed out that she wasn't late. It wasn't even 10 yet. If they agreed on a time, she expected to meet exactly then. It was him who came early. The man grabbed her by the shoulders. He was happy to see her and mentioned he hadn't even noticed how much she had grown up. Hayeon tried to stop him, but he held her tightly, trying to bring back old memories of when they used to mess around. Suho! Hayeon snapped angrily. She wasn't that little girl anymore, so this behavior wasn't okay. He had no choice but to let her go. She thought he was crazy and way too strong. Suho, however, was just genuinely happy to see her and wanted to know how she'd been. Hayeon said she was doing well, but had been really busy with work. He pointed out she was so busy he couldn't even reach her by phone. She replied that if he couldn't call, he could have just texted. He didn't understand why she annoyed him so much and grabbed her shoulders again. Hayeon told him to let go. She could barely breathe. Suho was the son of her mom's best friend and her childhood friend. They used to be very close. His family had owned large green tea plantations on Jeju for 3 generations. They opened several cafes and became quite famous. Suho had to continue the family business, but also pursued his own path. Now he ran a glass workshop on Jeju. Finally calming down, he gave her a proper hug. He hadn't seen her in a long time, and asked if she'd changed her shampoo since the scent was completely different. She was surprised. Did he always smell people when he met them? Besides, they were outside and anyone could see them. Did she really think he was crazy for doing that? Then why couldn't he explain why he smelled her? All he could say was that she was Jin Hayeon. And why was she even asking? Had she forgotten who he was? He asked why she wanted him to bring flowers. Was it for making perfume? She said she might need them not just for perfume, but also to decorate their stand. They had just been discussing this with Myunghyun when he called. She knew he could make anything happen. And it was true, since Suho had many connections. He asked what kind of flowers she needed. Hayeon knew roses only bloomed in May, but she needed roses, though she wouldn't mind looking at other options too. If they couldn't find roses, they could look for something similar. When she peeked into the car, she noticed a huge bouquet and asked what it was. Suho had heard from Sungwon that she had broken off her engagement. She asked if he was celebrating it like that. She said it so that Cha Jae wouldn't even think about contacting her. But he kept spreading rumors, which really annoyed her. Suho asked if she wanted him to go to Seoul and beat that jerk up. She said there was no need. He was already in her past. If he had known earlier, he would have thrown him into the Han River. But she just wanted him to forget about it. Secretary Kim saw Jinhan return to the office, looking upset, and asked if everything had gone well. He said everything was fine and told her not to pay attention to his appearance. It was just exhaustion. The secretary thought maybe something had gone wrong at the meeting, but since they were close friends, she doubted that was the reason. Jinhan asked Secretary Kim if she had called Director Chi Hayeon. She said she had, but was told Hayeon wasn't there. He understood why. He had seen Hayeon earlier near the house, talking to an unfamiliar guy. Jinhan asked if the secretary knew who Hayeon was with. She didn't understand why he was asking. She had no idea. It wasn't her job to track who Hayeon met. And was there even a reason to interfere in her personal life? Jinhan got irritated. He didn't understand why the project managers had loosened control over the participants. This wasn't some casual university trip. It was an important project, and no one was monitoring what was happening. They needed to double-check everything. Secretary Kim received instructions to pass on to the project manager, while Jinhan stayed alone in his office to gather his thoughts. He hadn't seen Hayeon since she arrived on Jeju, a whole week. He wondered how she was doing and if she had adjusted to the climate. That's when he saw her in another man's arms, laughing openly in front of everyone without caring who might see. Jinhan noticed the guy looked about the same age as her, and judging by their interaction, they knew each other well. Those kinds of touches, weren't they something lovers would do? But Jinhan knew for sure that guy wasn't part of the project. So who was he? It was a mystery, and it irritated him. Secretary Kim returned with information. Hayeon still hadn't come back. Jinhan assumed she was still with that guy. Could she really be away from work for that long? They didn't want strict rules because they valued flexibility, But that didn't mean participants could bring outsiders and spend unlimited time with them. Secretary Kim suggested that from now on, participants should log their exits and entries in a journal for security purposes. Jinhan agreed and told her to implement it immediately. By the way, actress Ko Yona was already in the garden and fully prepared. She was amazed by how beautiful everything was and thought she should have come earlier. She found Jinhan incredible. She asked her Uni when their flight was. The answer was 5:30 a.m. That meant they had about 10 minutes to look around. She would definitely remember this beautiful place, filled with blooming flowers and amazing scents. Her Uni noticed how good they looked together. No one would even guess he was an actor, too. Looking at them made it clear how hard being an actor was. If you wanted to date, you had to find any chance to be alone. Even though the garden wasn't officially open yet, they begged him to show it to them. He didn't mind. It would actually be great promotion if actress Go Yona visited before the opening. It was also a good opportunity for her, since she wouldn't be able to date abroad. Surprisingly, she had never been involved in any scandals. And it was true, though she didn't really think about it. Looking at her, someone felt envious, because she wasn't afraid to show her feelings. Maybe it was because she herself didn't know how to love. Dating had never been her priority. Jinhan believed there were more important things in life than small distractions. But today, something happened that made him question Hayeon, without him even trying to find out the truth. He had always put his responsibilities first, and his life had always been stable, until she appeared in it. And suddenly, there were moments he couldn't control anymore. Now there was a place in his life for a girl he couldn't stop thinking about, even though he couldn't bring himself to offer her what he had always avoided. Jinhan had always envied people who knew how to truly love, and he had only felt it once. But was it real love? He wasn't sure, so he couldn't say. He kept replaying moments in his mind, asking himself questions he couldn't answer. Without ever feeling it before, finding the truth was a long journey. He knew she had been through something similar, and he wanted to understand what had happened in her case. When he woke up, she was already gone. And by the time she realized it was love, it was too late, and she couldn't hold on to it. Jinhan noticed the actors had returned, but for some reason, seeing them together made him uneasy. This couple reminded him of something, and it irritated him to the point he didn't even want to look at them. He realized they reminded him of Chi Hayeon with another man, but he didn't understand why it bothered him so much. Even though he was good at hiding his emotions, his expression clearly showed he wasn't in the mood to talk. While talking with her Unni, Hayeon thought they might finally be able to build the stand today as planned. Today she and Suho visited a flower garden. If they needed anything, it could be delivered straight from Seoul. Myunghyun was pleasantly surprised that he agreed to help them. Hayeon noticed that Myunghyun looked awful and asked what was wrong. Was she sick? Was she still thinking about breakfast? If she was hungry, she should have stayed. But Myunghyun refused to give in, even if it meant starving. Then the girls noticed people standing near a cafe. The woman looked a lot like actress Go Yona, and next to her was director Yoo Jin-han. It really was her, and it seemed like she was about to leave. Watching them interact, it was clear they were very close. Hayeon couldn't believe her eyes. She couldn't imagine Jinhan being acquainted with such a famous actress. The girls were shocked when they saw them hugging. Myunghyun assumed they might be in a relationship. Hayeon didn't want to listen. She thought Myunghyun was talking nonsense. She believed they couldn't be together. But why did it look so natural? They didn't seem embarrassed at all, even with people watching. Hayeon noticed Jinhan smiling at the actress, the same way he smiled at her. She didn't want to look. It made her uncomfortable. Myunghyun insisted she look again. It was obvious they were dating. Hayeon thought he had never been like that with her. Then why had he told her he was satisfied with his current life and didn't want to change anything? To Myunghyun, it was strange. The actress had said she wasn't dating anyone. But then again, dating a celebrity isn't easy. Why hadn't director Yoo Jin-han told Hayeon anything? Myunghyun thought they should have been informed about a star visiting. Still, Jinhan wasn't obligated to share his personal life. They weren't that close. Maybe the actress was there for work. But why on Jeju? Maybe they just ran into each other by chance. Hayeon saw them hugging. It definitely looked like something was going on between them. But it was his resort, so of course he could come and check his property, especially since he was overseeing the project. Still, something felt off. While she was gone, the project manager had stopped by to check on the staff. But why without warning? He said that by order of the director, anyone leaving had to log it in a journal for security purposes. It was strange that Jinhan walked right past them with his delegation without even noticing they were watching him. His authority was impressive. He looked completely different from how he had been with Go Yogona. Now he was serious, and somehow even more striking. That kind of presence made people look at him differently. Hayeon felt hurt that he walked past her. She had really wanted to talk to him since they hadn't seen each other for a whole week. What was this feeling of distance between them? It wouldn't let her calm down, and she kept thinking about him more and more. For some reason, she suddenly felt insignificant compared to him. His presence overshadowed her completely. This strange feeling wouldn't leave her alone. Why did she feel so hurt? And why did her heart race whenever she saw him? Derek couldn't believe he was drinking with people he had only known for a few days. But it was a great day, and they should enjoy it, especially since he was treating everyone. They drank to memories on beautiful Jeju Island and to a successful project, no matter who would win. Glasses clinked as everyone laughed, even though they were competitors. The conversation was light and easygoing, but someone asked if anyone had seen the CEO. Some had. His name was Ryu Jinhan. He owned massive real estate, from a hotel in Seoul to a resort on Jeju. The girls noted he was young, handsome, and unmarried, and that was all that mattered to them. Some said he was just good-looking, nothing special. Still, it was true. He was masculine and attractive at the same time. The girls asked Myunghyun if she had really seen him since she knew so much. She was surprised. Hadn't they all seen him when signing the contract? But when they signed, only the project manager, Chu Do-han, had been there. And it was the same for everyone else. Myunghyun was surprised he personally signed the contract with them, but it didn't really matter, since he was still handsome anyway. Maybe someone knew what kind of relationship he had with Go-yeona, since she was also here. Too bad some hadn't seen her. Those who had seen her said she was incredibly beautiful. Her face was so small, she looked like a doll, like an angel, almost as if she had a halo. In the end, being famous was hard. Hayeon remembered Go-yeona had recently modeled for his company's cosmetics, so they must have known each other for a long time. Maybe that's why their hug looked so natural. They had known each other for years. But then why was she here today? There were no rumors about filming. Someone asked everyone to stay quiet. They had heard something from the project manager, but it wasn't supposed to be shared. It was said the company would personally financially support the winning team and sign an exclusive contract with them. Everyone was shocked. This company owned elite perfume brands. After this competition, the winner could boost their brand. That was the biggest reward. Then they realized Go-yeona would probably be the model, and everything made sense. Though some thought she just came to relax after filming, and what better place than Jinhan's resort, since he was very hospitable. The girls didn't understand how Uk Taehyun knew all that. He said she often visited the resort. She had many photos from there on social media. One girl immediately checked and found her account. It was true. She even played golf there, and the course looked amazing. Hayeon also checked Go-yeona's page, but for a different reason. She thought about messaging him. She typed that she heard he was on Jeju and wondered what he was doing, but then deleted it, afraid he might misunderstand. While Myunghyun talked with others, Hayeon wondered why Jinhan had personally signed the contract only with them. Others might think they had special advantages. Myunghyun couldn't stand being around Uk Taehyun. She thought he was cruel, the kind of guy who could easily dump someone. He said it had nothing to do with her, so she shouldn't be offended. He didn't understand why she reacted that way. Hayeon couldn't take it anymore and asked them to stop and ignore each other. Myunghyun had hated him from the start. Why did he keep interfering in her life? Did he still have something against her? Derek tried to calm her down. It seemed Director Lee was too emotional. He tried to calm both of them, but she demanded that Uk Taehyun leave immediately. Hayeon tried to hold her friend back as she kept lashing out. She said it was probably the alcohol making her so emotional. Myunghyun insisted she was fine. They could let her go, and that jerk should just leave her alone. Myunghyun shouted for everyone to leave her alone. She wasn't drunk. It was just Uk Taehyun pushing her to the point where she wanted to destroy him right then and there. It was really hard to calm Myunghyun down, but Hayeon managed to do it and got her friend home, not letting her do something she might regret. You could say it had been a tough day for Hayeon, but it seemed like she had done everything she planned. Now she could finally relax a little, since she barely got Myunghyun into bed, and she could have a can of beer. While drinking, they started asking each other about their personal lives. As the conversation went on, something pretty unpleasant happened. At first, it was fun and interesting. But then, because of her friend, who caused a loud scene, the party was ruined. Jinhan called Hayeon and asked where she was and what she was doing. She said she was already in her room and wasn't doing anything important, just drinking beer. When Jinhan suggested she come outside, since he was standing right in front of her room, Hayeon immediately agreed and rushed to meet him. Hayeon noticed that Jinhan looked really handsome, like he had carefully prepared for this meeting rather than just showing up randomly. If Hayeon had known he was coming to see her today, she definitely would have changed, because compared to him, She looked too casual. She greeted Jinhan and expected him to be more talkative, but he just stayed silent and looked at her. Sometimes a slight smile appeared on his face, but he just kept staring at Hayeon, making her feel shy under his gaze. She couldn't take it anymore and asked what was going on. Why did he come and call her only to stand there silently staring? Jinhan thought she couldn't stand still and kept swaying, so he assumed something was off with her. Hayeon didn't expect him to say that because she felt fine. Not wanting to irritate her, he said maybe he just imagined it. Hayeon felt unsure, but for some reason, she felt uncomfortable around him. Maybe it was because she had seen him with actress Go Yona. Jinhan had heard from other contestants that Hayeon had been at a company party. She wondered who the spy was that told him everything. Hayeon thought it might have been the project manager. After all, they filled out the outing log, so there shouldn't be any issues. They had all gathered to eat some delicious pork. Jinhan thought it sounded fun, but Hayeon felt it would have been better if they hadn't gone. He was surprised she didn't like the party. Did something happen that she regretted? She had to deal with some things. She apologized for smelling like grilled meat, feeling embarrassed in front of Jinhan. Jinhan wanted to smell it, so he leaned closer to her to check if she really smelled like grilled meat. Leaning in, he confirmed the scent. It was there, and it was pleasant and mouth-watering. His behavior felt unusual to Hayeon, making her uncomfortable, since she didn't find the smell of meat appealing. She asked Oppa if he actually liked the smell of pork, since he usually ordered beef. He smiled and said that while he preferred beef, he just liked the smell of something delicious. When Jinhan asked what she liked, Hayeon said she didn't have any specific preferences and liked almost everything. He thought that, unlike Yona, Hayeon didn't count calories or worry about portions, and he found that amazing. She didn't understand why he kept looking at her again. There was something in his gaze, even if he didn't realize it himself. His signature smile was there, making it impossible to read his thoughts. It was unique. Suddenly, Myunghyun's words came to Hayeon's mind, and she felt really hot. Was she tipsy from just a few sips of beer? It wasn't funny anymore. She couldn't understand why he kept silently staring at her, so this time she decided to ask directly. She asked why he was just looking at her in silence, and his answer surprised her. He just suddenly felt like buying her something tasty. Hayeon smiled, not even sure why, since she didn't eat anything. It felt strange. What was happening to him, and why was she acting like this? Why was it that every time she met Jinhan Oppa, she said nonsense? She thought she should go back to her room, but then asked why he came to see her in the middle of the night. He said he just felt like it. In reality, he came because that scene he witnessed bothered him. It stuck in his memory, and he couldn't just forget it. Jinhan didn't know if he had the right to ask about her personal life, but at least now he could see her face. He had an idea and wanted to suggest they go for a short walk, hoping she wouldn't refuse. Even though she felt awkward, she couldn't say no and agreed to walk with him. She hoped he would talk to her, but he walked in silence, just enjoying the quiet evening. She couldn't take the silence anymore and decided to start the conversation, asking if he had a new perfume. He was surprised and asked how she knew, since it barely differed from the previous one. Hayeon felt that this time he smelled like the sea, and she guessed right. It would have been strange if she hadn't, since it was her perfume. He asked how things were going for her. She wasn't sure, but it seemed okay, even though it was sometimes really hard. He asked if she wanted to take first place. That would be nice, although it was more Myunghyun's goal. He wondered if working here was harder than at the shop. Hayeon just did her job, especially since she had friends who always helped her. Jinhan was surprised when she mentioned friends and immediately remembered the guy he saw her with that morning. He asked if she had friends on Jeju. She thought he was asking silly questions this time. She had friends everywhere, not just on Jeju, but across the whole country. And he also had plenty of friends he met here. Hayeon knew his closest friend on Jeju very well. It was her brother. But he didn't know who her friend on Jeju was. She was sure he didn't know him. He was her mom's friend's son, and they grew up together. Jinhan realized they had known each other much longer than he thought. It was sad because that guy had to take over the family business. His family owned all the tea plantations on Jeju. For some reason, it really stung that he didn't know this part of her life. It truly felt sad. He was curious what she planned to do with him. She explained they were discussing different ideas for the project. Her friend also ran a glass factory on Jeju. Jinhan should understand that not only the product matters, but also its packaging. They were trying to create a design that matched their product. He smiled and let out a relieved sigh, realizing she had a truly talented friend. He was quite well known on Jeju because he held many workshops. It was strange Jinhan didn't know him, since her friend was so popular. By the way, she wanted to ask, Would Go-Yona promote the winner's product? Why did she think that? There was nothing about that in the contract. She figured Jinhan and the actress were very close, since they called each other by name. She came to that conclusion because someone said they saw her on the island. He agreed that the actress had indeed been his guest, but for completely different reasons. Hayeon didn't get a clear answer from him, but she noticed how gently he smiled when he thought about Go-Yona. Go-Yona came to Jeju to play golf. Jinhan had no idea where those rumors came from. Hayeon had heard that the actress often visited this place to relax, but she still wanted to know if they were actually close. This question really bothered her, so she decided to find out immediately and asked Jinhan what kind of relationship he had with the actress. He said they were just friends, nothing more. Hayeon didn't think so, because she noticed he had something special with that woman. Now she wondered what it felt like to be special to someone. A man like him could give so much warmth and tenderness. He asked if she liked Yona too. Of course she did. There were hardly any people who didn't. Everyone liked her, and seeing her in real life, she realized the actress looked even better than on screen. Jinhan caught himself thinking he had never really paid attention to that. Maybe Jinhan was used to being the center of attention, which is why he had refined taste and high standards. He had never really analyzed his standards or expectations for women, always believing you could feel the right person with your heart. If Go-Yona didn't attract him, then what type of woman did he like? Even as she asked, she realized she probably shouldn't be thinking about that. Jinhan asked what Hayeon planned to do tomorrow besides her main task. Obviously, she'd be busy since she planned to work outside. Suddenly, she remembered she might get punished for going outside during work hours, but he immediately said that wouldn't happen and she didn't need to worry. There were no penalties for a first offense, but he wasn't sure if she was allowed to get help from outside. In the end, the competition had to be fair. Hayeon hadn't thought about that. Other contestants weren't contacting anyone or getting outside help. Jinhan pointed out there shouldn't be any exceptions, and she knew that, yet still broke the rules. She understood, but she had already made a promise and couldn't back out. If she made a promise, she had to keep it. If she got punished, then so be it. There was nothing to fix. She asked when he was going back to Seoul. When she heard it was tomorrow, she realized he had a tight schedule. When he asked if she'd miss him, she was surprised and didn't know what to say. He said he'd be back in a few days, so she probably wouldn't even notice he was gone and would have plenty of time to focus on the project. He couldn't miss this moment. He personally wanted to check the project's progress and make sure they were on the right track. She didn't understand why he was smiling and speaking in riddles, and she felt a little foolish. Then he added that he wanted to feed her because sometimes she forgot to eat. His joke hit the mark and made her laugh. But he said he was always busy, so where would he even find time for her? Actually, he said, the question was whether she would have time for him. She put on a serious face and said she'd have to check her schedule. If she had free time, she'd let him know. But she also had to consider whether she'd even be allowed to go out. He had long gotten used to this familiar scenery, but now everything looked different. Was it because of Hayeon? Everything familiar suddenly seemed incredibly beautiful. She wanted Oppa to notice what she found. It was a plant that mostly grew on this island. It was a 4-leaf clover. She hadn't seen one in a long time, and her mom used to make crafts from dried flowers. She would dry them in books, then frame them or glue them onto napkins. Her mom always gave them as gifts, saying they would bring luck and should be kept close. She apologized to Jinhan for getting lost in her memories and becoming sentimental. Hayeon thought he came to Jeju often, so he must have seen things like this all the time. But in reality, he never had time to admire nature. She didn't have much free time either, yet she still found joy in little things like this. And that amazed him. It's really hard to find a 4-leaf clover, but somehow, when he was with Hayeon, he kept running into little miracles. Maybe it was true. Or maybe it just felt that way. Hayeon was amazing. She knew how to enjoy and appreciate the small things nature gave. Either way, he didn't regret the time he spent with her and wished this moment could last forever. This calm, easy conversation helped him relax and notice all the little details he used to ignore. An entire hour had passed, and it went by so quickly. Hayeon said if he was busy, he could head back. An hour had passed, and all they did was walk and find a clover. He had already played golf with Go-Yona earlier, and he had a flight to Seoul tomorrow. He must be tired and should rest. Hayeon took the 4-leaf clover and decided to give it to Jinhan, hoping it would bring him luck too. He never thought he could feel happy holding a simple plant he had never paid attention to before and rely on it for luck. She smiled and said he was her oppa, so she didn't mind. If things worked out for him, she'd be happy too. Was it possible a miracle had already happened the moment they stepped outside? Why did he only realize it now, holding the clover? He said you shouldn't pick flowers from private property, but she called him boring. He could have just said thank you. He thanked her but didn't know what to do with it. She explained he couldn't just throw it away. It used to be hers, and now she gave it to him. She gave him a gift, so next time they met, he could treat her to a nice meal. Was that really what she wanted? She could have asked for something more complicated. Still, he agreed. He had been planning to suggest that anyway. Hayeon said it was time to head back to the hotel and told him to follow her. Jinhan felt something strange, like a powerful wind had just passed through him. The closer they got, the more he wanted to stay in that moment forever. He silently followed her, lost in thought. This light, unfamiliar feeling wouldn't leave him. It was something he had never experienced before. The project work was picking up pace, and the further they went, the harder it got. Hayeon felt exhausted being restricted by all these rules. She felt like she was going crazy. Did they really have to go this far? They had already visited several flower shops with no results. Suho said that finding a great idea required a lot of effort. She needed to build endurance, even suggested she start working out. She didn't understand what endurance had to do with it. He wanted her to look at him. He was strong, and endurance was part of his business. He noticed Hayeon wasn't paying attention and decided to see what had distracted her while he was saying something important. It was an ad poster with actress Go Yeona, where she looked stunning. It was obvious men liked girls like that. It couldn't be otherwise. He believed beauty couldn't be bought, and time wouldn't help. It was something you were born with. So what would you call someone who didn't like her? He thought that person would be a complete idiot. Did he really just call someone crazy? Maybe it was just a matter of taste, but that guy really seemed out of his mind. Everyone knew Jinhan had high standards, so maybe he didn't notice Go Yeona's beauty. Maybe Oppa was picky. That's why he had broken off 2 engagements. Why would someone break off 2 engagements? She asked her friend, expecting a reasonable answer. He asked if it was with the same person, but everyone knew it was 2 different women. He didn't even know what to say. It didn't make sense how someone could call off engagements twice. You could say the man was really crazy, or maybe there were reasons. But reasons couldn't justify it happening twice. That was the truth. Logically speaking, if there were no problems, why break off engagements twice? Preparing for marriage once is hard enough. Twice is even more so. Hayeon didn't like talking to Suho. Where did he even come from, and why was she talking to him? She needed to be more careful with people. She hinted that she didn't like hearing this. The man said he couldn't stand men like that. He wondered how Jinhan even met those women. When Hayeon said he wasn't like that, he didn't understand why she was defending him. She needed to be careful before choosing the right man. At first, he'd talk sweetly, but later things would change. He insisted on continuing the conversation, saying he had promised her mother to take care of her and would protect her for the rest of his life. It was kind of ridiculous for him to talk about communication, since they weren't kids anymore playing games. He made that promise back when they were still in kindergarten. Either way, you shouldn't trust the first person you meet. Whenever she goes to another city, she completely loses her sense of judgment. Things weren't the way he was saying, but Suho insisted she just didn't realize it, trying to justify her actions while looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Even though she understood he might be right, she still didn't want to believe it, because she saw and felt things differently. When they went on that walk together, she felt a little shy at first, but then relaxed during their pleasant conversation and enjoyed the beautiful view. Then Hayeon realized she hadn't heard anything about him since he left for Seoul. He asked when she would come visit him, since it had been a while. When the timing was right, she promised she'd definitely visit. But for now, she was too busy with work. Was she really so busy she couldn't even find time to see her own brother, Sungwon? Still, Hayeon should stop by before she leaves. She said she always meets her brother whenever she comes to Jeju. She didn't like getting calls while eating, but she couldn't ignore it. It was Derek, asking what she was doing. When she told Derek she was having lunch, he said he'd call back later. Suho overheard the conversation and got curious about the name Derek, since he hadn't heard it before. Hayeon didn't want him getting the wrong idea. They were just co-workers. Still, he insisted she should be careful. Why would Derek call her outside of work hours? He remembered Hayeon mentioning Sungwon's friend who owned the resort. Could it be him? She was surprised. How did he know that? He smirked and said there wasn't much he didn't know. Sungwon had told him, even mentioning that thanks to his friend, Hayeon ended up here. Could he be the same guy they were talking about earlier? Hayeon immediately said he wasn't crazy at all, just a perfectly normal man. She wanted him to drop the topic because he was making things up. That guy wasn't even here. He had gone to Seoul because of important business. He was surprised she called him Oppa. But why not? He was her brother's friend. Realizing he couldn't change her mind, he decided he'd just have to keep an eye on her himself. Starting today, he'd come see her regularly, because it felt like she was in a dangerous place. While he was trying to enjoy his meal, she said if he was done talking, she was going to leave. She tried to slip away quickly, but he stopped her, saying he wasn't finished and telling her to come back. Just as he promised, Jinhan showed up at the event to congratulate the director. He didn't like these kinds of gatherings, but he had to attend. After greeting the director, he noticed how happy the man was to see him. The director smiled and said it had been a while. The director said it was great they met again and asked how Jinhan had been, thanking him for taking time out of his busy schedule to attend. Jinhan said he couldn't miss such a celebration. Now it was time to conquer the International Film Festival. The director was pleased to hear that and told him to relax and enjoy himself without thinking about work. He suggested Jinhan find some company to talk to and unwind with. Jinhan thanked him. Goyeon. I thought Jinhan wouldn't make it because he was so busy. She asked how he found the time. He said he cleared his schedule for the event. She said that made sense and that she was glad to see him again. Jinhan asked if she was doing well. She thanked him for his concern and said she was, adding that she planned to visit his resort soon. She wanted to chat more, but needed to greet other guests first, and he didn't mind. The event was just getting started, and the director asked everyone for a moment of attention, thanking them for coming. He wished everyone health, happiness, and success in the coming year. The guests warmly congratulated him, chatting and enjoying cocktails together. Jinhan wondered if he would ever feel that kind of joy about his own success, since he'd never had a celebration like that. In his 34 years, he had never truly enjoyed anything or wanted something for himself. Not really. But maybe he could. He was satisfied with his orderly life, but for some reason today, he felt empty. Lost in thought, he felt someone tap his shoulder. When he turned around, he was surprised to see Hayeon Ji. He hadn't expected to see her there. It had been 3 years since they broke off their engagement, and they hadn't met once since. He didn't even know she had returned to Seoul. He didn't know because he hadn't cared. She had come back at the beginning of the year. When he asked how she'd been, she said it was an honor. She said she was living the way her heart wanted, doing whatever she felt like without overthinking it. Back when they were about to get married, a close friend of hers died, and her whole outlook on life changed. She decided not to rely on her family anymore, and went to study in Germany, feeling cornered with no way out. Jinhan noticed she looked good. Even so, her family was still pressuring her to marry. She brushed it off and asked if anything had changed for him. She had heard a lot about him, including that he made the same mistake again. Was he still searching for the right person? Her situation was similar. Her family wanted her to marry someone they chose, but she wanted to make that choice herself. Jinhan didn't know what to think. They were forced to live by their family's expectations, and changing that meant conflict. She said that while she was in Germany, she often thought about him. If they hadn't broken off the engagement, they could have been married. If he had told her he loved her, she would have stayed. Jinhan wondered if it really mattered that much. She said sometimes those words could change an entire life. That's why couples constantly say, "I love you." It gives reassurance and confidence, and their happiness depends on it. Jinhan had never thought about it that way. People make choices expecting something good, but they didn't have that. He finally realized it. She smiled and joked that he'd always been slow to understand things. She asked if he had ever seen his reflection. He looked like someone who didn't care about anything or anyone around him. Kind to everyone, but never opening his heart. She said he was the most difficult man in the world. Jinhan wondered why she was the one giving him advice now. She said she was glad he agreed to break off their engagement and hoped he'd be happy. He would definitely find the right person someday. He just needed to stop being so picky and trust his feelings. She had to go, wished him luck, and said goodbye, even though part of her wanted to stay. Even though she was his former fiancé and he thought she might resent him, she acted gracefully and gave him meaningful advice he would remember. She said he would find someone his heart truly wanted, and only then would he understand real happiness. He realized he had never felt anything like that before. But would he recognize it when the time came and allow himself to be happy? At that moment, he noticed the beautiful Jeju sky for the first time, feeling something incredible he couldn't quite understand yet. Was it all thanks to Ji Hayeon? She had smiled just from finding an ordinary clover among the grass. Jinhan realized he suddenly missed her bright, cheerful laugh. That was exactly what he needed right now, and he wanted to go back to the island. A few days later, he was returning to Jeju Island, unable to wait for the plane to land. For the first time, he noticed the island's beauty. Had he ever been this excited to come here before? When he asked if Ji Hayeon was around, he was told she wasn't there. Had she broken the rules again and gone out? He wondered where she was, wanting to see her as soon as possible, thinking of all the places she liked on the island. The window in his office was open, and he thought he heard Hayeon's voice outside, talking to someone. Jinhan rushed to the window to confirm it was really her, and wasn't expecting what he saw. Hayeon and her friend Myunghyun were talking with the guy he had seen before. He was touching her hair again, and she was smiling sweetly. Even though he knew they'd been friends since childhood, he still felt something unpleasant, and didn't want that guy anywhere near her. Just moments ago, he had been in a great mood, but after seeing that scene, everything changed, and his mood dropped again. Hayeon looked so happy, not even minding her friend touching her hair and joking with her. Deep down, he felt a surge of anger, and right now, he felt like he could tear everything apart. At first, he decided to calm down and think everything through. He understood that decisions made on emotions could lead him down the wrong path. He thought about Song Hyun-jin, who said that if he had loved her, even though she knew he didn't, she would have stayed. She looked at his expression and could tell he didn't really care who was by his side. But he still had a chance to find the right person for himself. It had to be someone his heart would choose. He would understand it when, upon meeting her, he started feeling all kinds of emotions. Until now, he had never really thought about it, because everything in his life used to satisfy him. Jinhan didn't want to change anything. But now, he did. Why did Hayeon immediately come to his mind? What was that feeling every time he saw her? He felt restless, and a sense of desire. Jinhan didn't notice when Secretary Kim walked into his office. She saw that her boss looked troubled and asked what happened. Jinhan replied that he was just a little tired. That's why he looked like that. Secretary Kim understood. He had come to Jeju after a packed schedule in Seoul. Secretary Kim suggested postponing the overseas trip, but reminded him they needed to sign a contract with Seed Company in France. It would be impossible to imagine producing the winner's product in their own workshop. That's exactly why, from the planning stage, they wanted to collaborate with that company. Even if he postponed the trip for a while, he would still have to go eventually. Secretary Kim understood, but if he didn't have time for business, why did he go to Jeju in the first place? Jinhan told Secretary Kim that while he was in Seoul, he ran into Song Hyun-jin. It seemed like she had become quite well known now. Secretary Kim had heard that the girl participated in an international art exhibition, but didn't understand why he was telling her this. Usually he didn't care about other people, so he never talked about them. The secretary tried to reassure Jinhan that he was doing everything right, since he had always been kind to others. Someone told him something, and it made him think. He was a man who showed kindness to everyone, but never opened his heart to anyone. For him, that was the hardest thing in the world, and he thought he didn't even know how to feel. Secretary Kim assumed that was something Song Hyun-jin might have said. You couldn't find a more humane director than Jinhan. And that was true. Secretary Kim had worked with many directors, but she could confidently say Jinhan was the best. Maybe he had just become indifferent to his work. The secretary dared to say that right now he should focus on his personal life. And she was right. His personal life wasn't his job. He decided not to put things off anymore, but to do what his heart wanted and follow his desires. Since Hayeon said she loved eating everything, he suggested starting with grilled meat. When she met Jinhan, she felt the scent of Seoul. Hayeon asked how he was doing, if anything interesting had happened that he could share. As always, everything was great for Jinhan. When she said she had been bored all this time because there was almost no entertainment on the island, Jinhan realized that right now, being next to Hayeon made him feel at peace. Hayeon believed the island was much better. It suited him more than the restless, soulless city. That's why she was so surprised by his sudden arrival. He just wanted to have a meal with her, but Hayeon never expected him to call her right after landing. Honestly, Hayeon felt a little shy. It was unexpected, but pleasant. Jinhan carefully observed the girl. He wanted to read her true emotions and understand whether he was on the right path, or if it wasn't too late to stop. Hayeon really wanted to go to a famous meat restaurant and hoped their wishes matched. Jinhan agreed and noticed she was genuinely happy. She smiled because she would be eating with Oppa. Hayeon said their perfume was almost ready. That day, she signed a contract with Shin Soo-ho, who would design the bottle. She also became friends with other employees, and recently, they even had drinks together. Thankfully, this time the atmosphere wasn't ruined. As Hayeon talked about her work, Jinhan realized his heart trembled just hearing her voice. The soft scent of her perfume made him forget about distant Seoul and want to stay by her side, just to keep feeling these emotions. Even ordinary things felt calming around her. But he was becoming more and more greedy. He didn't want to share her with anyone. They arrived at a famous restaurant known for delicious meat. Hayeon walked up to the door but found it strange that no one was there. there were usually lines. She thought maybe the place was closed today. She stared at the closed restaurant, confused. Did places like this really take breaks? The sign said so. Jinhan noticed she looked upset and stared at him with surprised eyes, and it amused him. He enjoyed these little moments. When Jinhan tried to open the restaurant door, Hayeon didn't understand why. After all, you can't go in if it's closed. But when he walked inside, he was warmly greeted as director, and they noted he hadn't visited in a while. There was no need to worry. They would be served something delicious, so they could sit anywhere. Hayeon realized the restaurant also belonged to Jinhan, and he confirmed it. He had just bought it recently. As expected, Ryu Jinhan was unpredictable. She didn't even know he used to be a regular here. He just took over the place. Like a true businessman, he was kind of terrifying. But to Hayeon, that was a good thing. Oppa felt like he was from another world. When Hayeon looked at him, she realized how different he was from ordinary people. Jinhan wondered why she thought that. She told him to look at this place. If she liked the food at a restaurant, she would just come back, not buy it outright. There was nothing strange about it. Jinhan saw it as a simple investment. When he found a profitable opportunity, he didn't miss it. Hayeon believed it was different. Not everyone could sense where to invest without losing anything. Actually, at the beginning of the year, someone wanted to buy Hayeon's company, Kipi, but it didn't work out. The terms were good, but she couldn't give up her company. It was too hard to let go of something she built with her own hands. Kipi meant something more to her, so she couldn't just betray her work like that. The anxiety and fear before starting, the excitement of creating their first product, the curiosity of customers, and their smiles. Of course, Hayeon was really happy that her work was appreciated, and that gave her strong beliefs. Jinhan became curious about what those beliefs were. It was that they should keep creating products using good, natural ingredients. Jinhan agreed. That was a great idea. And every time she said that, Myunghyun would laugh at her. Before, Jinhan thought she was still very young. But when did she grow up so fast and become such a true professional? Hayeon liked that Jinhan supported her and saw her as a professional, because she truly loved what she did. Jinhan wondered if he wanted to buy Kipi as a good investment, what answer would she give him? The girl asked how much he would offer. He was surprised. Would she really agree so easily? What happened to her beliefs? That's why she said business was a scary thing, but they should see how serious he was. Jinhan offered 10 billion won and wanted to hear her answer. Was that too much? At this point, she could already call him her boss. She had already told him his way of thinking was different. Who would offer that kind of money? It was unrealistic, so she took it as a joke and smiled. Even though the amount sounded crazy, it was possible, in theory. But just imagining it didn't mean it would happen. What would she do in that situation? Jinhan was curious and wanted to see how far she could grow, even though it was an unreasonable request. Hayeon didn't need to worry. She had already proven she could run Kipi. Unreal sums of money and unbelievable ideas. For some reason, her heart trembled when he praised her. Hayeon thought Jinhan was actually a dangerous man. She wouldn't work for the company. She was already satisfied. And many people felt the same way. He realized Hayeon would stick to her beliefs. But could her mind ever change? She saw no reason to risk it, but said she'd consider it if he added one more zero to the offer. He pointed out her negotiation skills were terrible, but his words always boosted her confidence. That's why she always looked forward to seeing Jinhan Oppa. He really did think differently from everyone else, and that was his unique charm. Lost in conversation, they didn't notice how time passed, and their food was already on the table. Everything looked delicious, so they could finally start eating. She wondered if he was going to give her some kind of task after the meal. She felt like she was at some kind of secret dinner. She had felt that way even before joining the project. Jinhan didn't understand what she meant. She continued, saying he joked around while she had to work really hard. She did it, but too slowly. Hayeon thought he was strange, like there was always some hidden motive behind his actions. Jinhan suggested dropping the conversation and just enjoying the food, since she had been craving grilled meat so much. If she didn't understand, this was his way of thanking her for the clover she gave him. She was surprised. Was he really serious about that? Why did he make such a big deal out of it? He didn't have to. He could do whatever he wanted. Hayeon was confused. How could he say his words meant nothing when they clearly shaped all his actions? But maybe to him, it really didn't mean anything. If he kept acting this sweet, people might misunderstand him. Jinhan wondered why she thought that. If she hadn't known him since childhood, she might have misunderstood his actions too, because they were so ambiguous. Hayeon wanted to know if he was seeing anyone. The man was surprised. He didn't think she'd be interested in something like that. At work, Jinhan was flawless, but she knew nothing about his personal life. He said that even in that, he was perfect. Hayeon didn't agree, thinking his behavior was shameless. But the man wanted to hear her opinion on how many times he had dated. What kind of question was that? Now she understood why Myunghyun said Yoo Jinhan was a dangerous man. Jinhan needed to think about it. He felt like the last time he dated was back in college, when he was still a student. It seemed like Hayeon was more interested in him than he expected. Why else would she care about his personal life if she never did before? She didn't see anything strange about it. She just liked hearing fun stories, especially if they were from Jinhan's life. He had dated a few times, but he didn't have any special memories, so there was nothing to really talk about. Though he could listen to her stories. Now she realized her past relationship was basically trash. It couldn't even be called a relationship. There weren't any good memories to recall. Honestly, she felt much happier now than before. Even though it sounded strange, Jinhan was glad to hear that. By the way, she didn't know what he thought, but when they were together, she felt special. She never felt that way with her ex-boyfriend because there was always a tense atmosphere, and she tried to stay within strict limits. Why did that happen? And what was the reason? If she could explain, Jinhan wanted to hear it. What was impossible for ordinary people was normal for him. Jinhan could enjoy his meal without thinking about anything. It was the same as last time at the hotel bar. He wondered what was wrong. He didn't do anything that could be considered inappropriate by other people. That piercing gaze again. It made Hayeon flustered and speechless, unable to continue the conversation. She couldn't say anything except that she liked it, and that scared her. She liked it so much, she wished time would stop. It was all because he was a special man to her. Someone like him she had never met before in her life. He spoke arrogantly and confidently again, so Hayeon pointed out that he was wrong. But he added that he spoke that way because she was special to him. Even though Jinhan was kind to people, he treated no one the way he treated Hayeon. Their lunch was coming to an end. Hayeon felt satisfied because everything was delicious. She was happy to see Jinhan and wouldn't refuse if he invited her out again. They just had lunch together, but she felt like they had already become closer, and she was very happy now. Jinhan was a gentleman and knew how to please a woman. He understood that care and attention were always appropriate if a man wanted to win her heart. Hayeon exhaled because she couldn't get used to it. When he asked what exactly she meant, she hinted at his attentiveness. What exactly did he do that was so unusual? Something that made her flustered and uncomfortable. Didn't he find it strange that a director personally drove her home in his own car? Maybe it wasn't a business meeting at all, but something personal. She didn't understand why he always said such strange things. If he wanted to say something, why not say it directly? She always tried to understand him correctly, and that wasn't easy. Hayeon noticed how confidently Jinhan held the steering wheel, and that his hands were very handsome. She liked men like Jinhan. He was attractive, confident, and always achieved his goals, yet never bragged about his wins. Of course, he had flaws too, which Hayeon noticed, but they weren't that significant, so they could be ignored. It was obvious Jinhan was closed off from others. Almost nothing was known about his personal life. Still, despite his attractive appearance and many admirers, he never acted like a playboy. Jinhan didn't understand why she was always surprised by his behavior. Couldn't he do what he wanted? Hayeon asked what he meant. She thought he was talking about today's meeting and how it felt like a date. She understood him correctly. That's exactly what he meant. But had she ever been on a date like that before? She was surprised, but of course not. She barely left Seoul. When she was in a relationship, she only saw her boyfriend late at night or watched movies on weekends. That was the extent of her experiences. Now she realized those were meaningless relationships with no growth or future. She asked how Jinhan's dates usually went. He smiled because he didn't even know what could be considered a date. Was he really that clueless about dating, or just pretending so he wouldn't talk about his past relationships? To her, a date had to be something special, spontaneous or planned, something that left a lasting impression. You could meet in different cities and spend time together. Jinhan should know that, since he probably had a lot of experience. He thought Hayeon might be jealous, but she immediately denied it. Maybe she just didn't express herself clearly. Maybe deep down, he wanted her to be jealous, which was why he looked a bit disappointed. Why did she suddenly feel guilty? It seemed like she ruined Jinhan's mood, even though she didn't want to. He made a call, saying he would arrive and everything needed to be ready in 15 minutes. Of course, everything was already prepared and waiting for them, but the director should be careful on the road. She smiled and curiously asked if they were going to a paradise-like place. He always knew Hayeon was smart, so this time she understood him correctly. They really were going to a wonderful place to enjoy the island's scenery. Could Hayeon really see the beauty of the island today while riding on the boat where they would spend time together? That beauty couldn't be described in words. She was amazed by the scenery against the sunset. Hayeon stared into the distance for a while, unable to find words to express her admiration for the beauty. It was a great fortune to see such a beautiful sunset in Jeju. She couldn't remember the last time she felt so peaceful. Maybe it was the first time since her parents passed away. Everyone around her worried about her, and she felt like a burden. She had to put in a lot of effort to reassure those who worried about her. Maybe that's why she now felt so happy. It felt like her heart might burst. Even if it wasn't as important to him, to her this place felt like paradise, especially when she was with him. Jinhan was hearing such sincere words from Hayeon for the first time. She spoke honestly from her heart. She liked it so much that she never wanted to leave this place. Jinhan didn't expect this little surprise to leave such a big impression on her. Hayeon wished time would stop so she could fully enjoy this beauty. Her body and soul felt at peace in such a place. She asked Jinhan if they could stay there until dark. He didn't mind, but another time, the water temperature dropped sharply at sunset. She understood, but his answer still made her feel disappointed. She didn't want to leave this place and return to everyday life. Hayeon noticed something had gotten into his hair from the wind, and she wanted to fix it. His hairstyle was slightly messy. Jinhan liked that she paid attention to his appearance and tried to fix it so he would look perfect again. She removed something that had gotten into his hair, and it looked much better. She didn't even try to resist the urge to touch Jinhan. And this was the perfect excuse at the moment. He looked at her again with that serious gaze. But now she felt more relaxed, even though earlier she was shy and avoided his eyes. Jinhan thanked Hayeon, smiling and noting that after her touch, he looked much better than before. Then, when he looked into her eyes, he realized he had never thought about how beautiful she was. The evening waves grew stronger, and the boat began to rock more. It was a sign they needed to head back to shore. Hayeon didn't expect it, so she lost her balance and nearly fell. Jinhan reacted immediately, trying to catch her before she fell into the water. Holding her by the waist with one hand and gripping the railing with the other, he made sure they wouldn't fall into the water together. When everything calmed down and the boat stopped rocking, Jinhan still held Hayeon tightly in his arms because he didn't want to let her go. Jinhan was worried about Hayeon and wanted to make sure she was okay, hoping she'd feel comfortable even in a situation like this. Maybe she got scared since it was really dangerous. But everything would be fine because he was right there with her. Hayeon was shaking all over, so Jinhan thought she was cold. But everything was fine. She was just a little scared. On the contrary, she actually felt really hot, even though he didn't understand why she was still trembling. She didn't know why it was happening. She just felt a bit uncomfortable. Jinhan touched her head to check if she had a fever. Jokingly, he touched the tip of her nose with his finger and said it was cold. She kept assuring him that she'd be okay, so he didn't need to worry for no reason. Hayeon felt uneasy with how close Jinhan was, holding her in his arms and not even thinking about letting go. Jinhan didn't think it would bother her since he had no bad intentions. He was just trying to keep her warm. He supported Hayeon so she wouldn't fall, since the boat was being rocked very strongly by the waves. He kept her from falling because he didn't want her to get hurt. Otherwise, their outing would end badly and leave unpleasant memories. If it weren't for him, Hayeon would be flailing in the water trying to get out, and just the thought scared her. He had to hold her again because the boat was being tossed violently by the strong wind. No matter what she said, Jinhan wasn't ready to let her go, because her safety was his priority. Was her self-preservation instinct always this strong? Why was Hayeon trembling again? Did she not like his surprise? She had seemed happy before. Now she looked at Jinhan with a frightened expression, hoping she was safe with him and nothing would happen. Even though her smile wasn't the same as before, Jinhan still found her incredibly beautiful, even with her lips trembling from the cold. Her scent was so sweet that it made him feel almost intoxicated. He didn't want to let her go. It felt incredibly good. Hayeon didn't understand what was going on with Jinhan or why he was looking at her like that without saying anything. Is he trying to seduce me? Hayeon thought, and immediately warned him not to do that. The captain of the boat apologized to the director, saying he couldn't keep the vessel steady and that it was rocking more and more. Jinhan wanted to check if there were any issues on the boat, but the captain said nothing was wrong, just that the boat sometimes drifted during turns. The captain didn't want the director to worry and promised to be more careful. Hayeon didn't believe him since she had almost fallen twice. Jinhan felt it wasn't safe to stay on the deck and suggested they go somewhere safer. He extended his hand and told her to hold on to it, trust him completely, and he would make sure she was safe. Why wouldn't she take his hand? Did she not trust him? But she needed to hurry because without holding on, she could fall into the water. Hayeon didn't want to fall into the water, so she quickly grabbed Jinhan's hand and followed him. Holding his hand, she felt his warmth transfer to her. A sense of calm filled her heart, and her body almost stopped trembling. Hayeon said that, despite how the evening ended, she really enjoyed it and was grateful to Jinhan for giving her such an amazing experience. As it started getting dark, she realized it was time to head back home. Tomorrow was a new day with a lot of work waiting for her. Hayeon couldn't remember the last time she had such a great evening. She felt comfortable with Jinhan and truly happy. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing, but she decided to ask him something she had never dared to ask before. She wanted to know what he would be doing tomorrow. If he had time, she'd like to treat him to dinner. Jinhan found her offer interesting, but he apologized and suggested having dinner another time. Was he really going to be busy tomorrow? Still, they could make time for dinner. Jinhan explained he needed to return to Seoul briefly. Again? He had just arrived today and already had to leave. Jinhan's work schedule was exhausting. Soon he would have to go abroad. Was he only on Jeju Island today because he wanted to have dinner with her? In response, he said he had promised to have dinner together, and he always kept his promises. But why didn't he postpone it, given how busy he was? She apologized for taking up his time. Jinhan wanted to know if she didn't enjoy the evening. Hayeon said she liked it and had many impressions, but there was one thing she didn't want to talk about. If he was leaving today, when would he return to the island? He thought he'd be in Paris next week, so he might return on the weekend. She decided that's when she would treat him to a meal. Jinhan was curious why she wanted to do that so much. There was nothing mysterious about it. Didn't she just want to treat her oppa to something tasty? Of course he would accept her invitation if she truly wanted it, and if it made her happy. He would call her as soon as he returned to the island. Finally, she could head back to the hotel, and she wished Jinhan to be careful on the road. She was about to leave, but noticed Jinhan was still standing there, so she asked why he wasn't moving. He said he was waiting for her to go inside, but she was already right in front of her house, so he could leave. Jinhan agreed, waved, and wished her a good night. Hayeon looked back to make sure Jinhan had left, but he was still standing there. He waved again and reminded her to be careful, watch her diet, and not overwork herself. Hayeon liked this excessive attention from Jinhan because no one had cared about her like that in a long time. She wished him the same, knowing he had a tight schedule and not much time to rest. It was a pity, but she had to think positively. He would be looking forward to their next meeting. Hearing those words from Sun Hyun-jin left him completely shattered. But he couldn't admit yet that he had come here just for her. The trip to Paris was very important for Jinhan, but he didn't plan to stay long. He wanted to see Hayeon again. The meeting was scheduled at the seed company office on the day they arrived in Paris. He was greeted by Francis Mazel, the company owner, and Gaspard Vasseur, the head perfumer. Jinhan was glad to meet them. The men understood he had traveled a long way and was tired, so they decided to give him a small gift to lift his mood. This fragrance of lily of the valley symbolized happiness and success. For Europeans, it's a special flower. In their company, there's a tradition of releasing this scent on May 1st. The perfumer created it personally for their guest. For Jinhan, receiving such a symbolic gift was a great honor. Then they decided to get straight to business, not wanting to keep their guest too long, knowing he wanted to rest. Finally, Jinhan arrived at the hotel, and thankfully, everything went well and all matters were resolved. As he loosened his tie, Jinhan remembered the perfumer, Gaspard Vasseur, commenting that it was his favorite color. The man noted that the color of the tie was excellent and perfectly matched his style. In their company, the perfumer held more importance than the owner, so Jinhan wore the tie. He realized that Secretary Kim had, as always, done an excellent job. But what was this? Jinhan wondered, feeling a strange sensation he couldn't quite understand. Wasn't it fascinating how green absinthe turned white? Yet his thoughts kept drifting to Hayeon, and she wouldn't leave his mind. He was certain that green was the color of jealousy, especially when she asked if he liked the absinthe. Jinhan realized that thinking about Hayeon warmed his heart, and he missed her. Perhaps this strange feeling inside him could be called affection. When Ji Hayeon finished her homework, of course Jinhan was supposed to comfort her after her breakup. But that day, he ended up falling into a trap himself. He didn't know why, but he felt disappointed. He suddenly wanted to become someone special to Hayeon. And it really was like that. Everyone knew the color green symbolized jealousy, which was still unacceptable to Jinhan. The man stood by the window, looking at the Eiffel Tower shining outside the hotel where he was staying. Lately, his stable life had started to fall apart. Deep down, Jinhan wanted this change, but he was also afraid to actually make it happen. He looked at his watch, wanting to know the time since the time difference was quite big. The clock showed 2 p.m., which meant it was 9 p.m. in Jeju. The man decided to call Hayeon, even though a thought lingered in his mind that she might not answer because she could be out enjoying herself after work. Hayeon answered almost immediately. When Jinhan asked how she was doing, she was surprised. Did he really call just to check on her? Jinhan asked what she was doing. Hayeon smiled, thinking he wouldn't believe her, and said she was soaking her feet in the water. He didn't quite understand her answer. It sounded strange to him. He heard a voice in the background saying the director was going too far and questioning why he was breaking their agreement. It was Myunghyun, sitting next to Hayeon. She tried to ask Jinhan why there was no pool at the villa. The girl tried to calm her friend, realizing she was saying too much. The hotel was located in a scenic part of the city, so he didn't understand what the girls didn't like and asked if he should change their accommodation. Hayeon didn't want that. Instead, she asked how things were going for him in Paris. She could tell things were going well from his voice. He sounded too confident. If things were going well, then he could come to Jeju sooner. Jinhan said he would return in 3 days, as his employees needed a break. From Hayeon's voice, he realized she missed him. But besides giving his staff a break, he also had several meetings to attend in Paris. The girl understood everything, but she still wanted to hear Jinhan's impressions of Paris. He didn't really know yet, since he had barely left the hotel. If they went together, Hayeon said she would show him many places. Jinhan thought that was true. Paris without her didn't seem fun at all. She suggested they travel to Paris together someday, and Jinhan liked the idea. Hayeon wanted to know if he would go straight to Jeju after Paris. When he asked if she wanted to see him that badly, she replied that she had promised to treat him to a meal, and promises should be kept. She asked Hayeon, who recommended a restaurant. It was run by a female diver, and reservations had to be made 3 days in advance. She heard it was a must-visit place in Jeju. It seemed like Ji Hayeon was taking their lunch plans very seriously, so she was eagerly looking forward to the meeting. Jinhan said he would come straight to Jeju after Paris. The girl understood that if he promised something, he would definitely keep it. Myunghyun overheard their conversation and asked her friend if she and Jinhan were dating. The girl tried to explain that it was just a simple lunch together and nothing more. Myunghyun found it funny that Hayeon was asking him to return to Jeju sooner instead of home, so her friend insisted she explain everything from the very beginning of their relationship. Hayeon said they just had meals together, nothing different from what they did with her. Then why was director Ryu Jinhan treating only Hayeon and not inviting her along? She didn't think there was anything wrong with having a meal together. Her friend wanted to know if Hayeon planned to meet him. Maybe that's why she was talking so sweetly to him. Hayeon tried to deny it, saying he was just tired from traveling, so she suggested they eat together. Myunghyun didn't want Hayeon to lie to herself. She told her to place a hand on her chest and listen carefully. She should feel how her heart beats after talking to Jinhan. And it wasn't just because of simple conversation, but because of how she felt about him. In the silence, Hayeon felt her heart pounding so strongly, it seemed like it would burst out of her chest. She enjoyed hearing his voice, and her heart trembled when she heard his laughter. Could something so simple make her heart race like that? Hayeon realized the truth, even though she tried to lie to Myunghyun. She wasn't in the mood for jokes and wanted her friend to drop the subject. Maybe she could have reacted the same way with her ex-boyfriend, Cha Jaeon. Cha Jaeon wasn't the case. This reaction was only for Jinhan. Her friend was very happy for Hayeon, but the girl didn't understand why this was happening, since she never planned any kind of relationship with Jinhan. Myunghyun just liked romantic stories with hidden motives. Secretary Kim knew that director Jinhan was tired, but she wanted him to handle this issue. She showed him an online video that had already reached over 2 million views, and unfortunately, it was true. Jinhan asked how bad things were. Secretary Kim said they had already contacted their lawyers, but it would be difficult to resolve since the video had spread online. The man asked where Young was. The girl thought he was very angry and carefully said his sister was at the hotel. Jinhan suggested going to the hotel right away and not delaying solving the problem. By the time Jinhan arrived, everyone had gathered. Only Young didn't seem happy to see him. Even Oppa came here, the girl said, though she didn't see it as a big issue. Ryu Young was the director of HS Cosmetics and Jinhan's younger sister. Ryu Sana, the owner of the company and Jinhan's aunt, looked very worried, but was glad he agreed to help. Ryu Taejo, a young heir of the Hissen Group and Jinhan's cousin, was also there, along with director Min, the president's right-hand man. Normally, these people never got involved in family matters, so the problem was much worse than he expected, and now wasn't the right time at all. Ryu Young had received a promotion and changed the company's policy to attract younger employees. The company began pressuring older employees to leave and free up positions. The conflict escalated as many of the employees were pregnant or had children, leading to criticism that the company didn't respect its workers and causing a generational conflict. Those who were unfairly dismissed started filing petitions and protesting. As a result, Yoon-kyung argued with the group manager, who filed an appeal. In the middle of the argument, Yoon-kyung suddenly slapped the manager in the face. It was unclear how far the situation would go. They were trying to contact the victim, but without success. Public opinion was clearly negative. But was there any alternative? They needed to reach an agreement, but the other side hired a lawyer and the press got involved, so they had to proceed very carefully. Yoon-kyung believed the lawyer was exaggerating and that the case wasn't serious. It seemed like the man had hired a weak lawyer, so they had nothing to worry about. They could easily fix everything with their resources. Jinhan told his sister to stay quiet. She was shocked. Didn't he see the comments online where people were insulting her? She was still young and deserved the right to make mistakes. Why were people being so cruel? No one had the right to talk about her like that. So how could he tell her to stay silent? Did he really expect her to stay quiet and just listen to all those insults? She had made a big mistake this time and should step back, but she refused to stay silent. No one was going to push her around. Jinhan addressed Ryu Tae-jo, realizing not everyone agreed with her plan to hire employees. Plus, her promotion came from connections, so it wasn't a good idea to start this now. When asked what he would do about the video, Jinhan said he couldn't help her. Tae-jo said that when he saw her in the video, he thought she was under the influence of drugs. Yoon-kyung got angry and demanded he be removed from her sight. If their grandfather hadn't asked him to come, he wouldn't have come at all. Did she really think they all wanted to listen to her right now? Jinhan felt Tae-jo was right. The video wasn't going anywhere. He didn't care what happened next to Yoon-kyung, but he was still grateful to everyone. They usually met every month to discuss company matters, but this time he missed the meeting. He worried he might have missed something important. It would be better to just apologize quickly and move on. No need to blow things out of proportion. She didn't understand why she had to apologize. If he didn't like the situation, he should complain to his own family instead. The girl got angry. Did her family really think she was crazy? She couldn't even become the heir because she was a woman. Things shouldn't be this way. Why couldn't she understand? They were facing serious problems. After that incident, the company's stock, even subsidiaries, fell in value. Stock prices could recover, but what about their image? Right now, the entire Hayeon group was suffering because of one person, Yoon-kyung. The girl believed everything could be fixed, but Jinhan thought it needed to be resolved within a week, or it would affect all of them. She insisted she would handle everything herself and didn't need instructions. Turning to Jinhan, Yoon-kyung asked why he was always so harsh with her. He wasn't any better than her. He had broken off engagements twice, causing major issues for the family. He had no right to say anything to her. Their aunt picked up a water bottle that had fallen from Yoon-kyung's hand and slammed it on the table, loudly demanding everyone stop arguing. They were in no position to argue. They needed to find the right solution to handle the situation so the company's image wouldn't suffer. They wanted Yoon-kyung to listen to them carefully. In moments like this, there's no way to hide. A cowardly escape would only make the backlash worse. The days when everything could be easily forgotten were long gone, so turning a blind eye was no longer possible. The girl wanted to hear her aunt's opinion on what she should do in the situation. And everyone, in one voice, insisted that she needed to apologize. Yoon-kyung couldn't agree with this, because how could her aunt ask her to do something like that? She couldn't do it even under the threat of death, because it felt like humiliation to her. Stubbornness wouldn't solve anything. Violence can never be justified. Yoon-kyung was at fault for hitting someone. After those words, her sister couldn't understand whose side Jinhan was on. The girl believed she had already been humiliated enough and didn't understand what else everyone wanted from her. She had said before that it was self-defense, since the manager himself had pushed her first. That man was living off the salary she paid him. Tae-jo pointed out that this was her honest response. Ryu Young-kyung saw herself as a director, which meant all employees should be like family to her. Treating people who worked hard for the company like that was unacceptable. Yoon-kyung was not worthy of being a director. Jinhan said those things because he didn't know everything. He didn't understand her situation, so he shouldn't judge her. She shouldn't be treated like she was worthless just because her business was small. For Jinhan, it didn't matter whether a person had a small business or a huge empire. First and foremost, they had to be human. To be human? Yoon-kyung was surprised. Was Oppa talking about himself? In her opinion, he pretended to be kind and caring only when he needed something. Only true hypocrites behaved like that. She needed to act calmly, since he wasn't trying to teach her anything. But she still had to take responsibility for her actions. Don't make her laugh, because he didn't think that way at all. Jinhan needed to know how he truly looked. He was arrogant, considering everything in the world beneath him. He felt superior when helping others. He would respond if she was wrong, because he liked it when girls in trouble started relying on him. Jinhan didn't even try to stop his sister, as he wanted her to say everything on her mind. He didn't want Ryu Yoon-kyung to make things more complicated. She believed Jinhan understood everything she was saying. He always acted kind, which was why he enjoyed playing with orphan children who had lost their parents. Because of her anger and hatred toward everyone, Ryu Yoon-kyung had already crossed every line with her words. So Jinhan couldn't hold back and ordered his sister to shut up immediately. Everyone present carefully watched what was happening between Ryu Yoon-kyung and Jinhan. The girl kept speaking and asked why he even cared about worthless people. She felt sorry for Jinhan because, in her eyes, he was just as worthless, feeding off what he saw in those poor people. This meant that this time, he would take the wrong side. She reminded him of the cheap girls he had dated before. Did Jinhan really think she wouldn't find out who he was hiding on Jeju? Had that girl not already offered him her body? Because that was the only way she could get anything from him. Jinhan could tolerate insults directed at himself, but he couldn't allow Ryu Yoon-kyung to speak badly about Hayeon, who didn't deserve such words. Ryu Yoon-kyung didn't expect Jinhan to do something like that. Why did he do it, when she was left humiliated in front of the family? Jinhan believed his sister needed to calm down, because her mind was boiling from overexcitement, and she was talking nonsense. Jinhan grabbed Ryu Yoon-kyung's suitcase and threw it aside. He didn't want to see his sister anymore, and demanded that she leave immediately. When Jinhan kicked her out, the girl couldn't believe he would do something like that to her. He called the hotel reception, said it was Ryu Jinhan, and ordered room 103 to be cleaned. His sister couldn't believe her ears. Had her brother lost his sanity? He clarified that this wasn't just cleaning. The guest was checking out, and from that moment on, no room should be assigned to Ryu Yoon-kyung anymore. Was he doing this because she insulted his girlfriend? What was she supposed to do now after being kicked out? Jinhan believed she had to solve this problem on her own. From now on, she would not be allowed to stay in any of their hotels until she became a decent human being. He would take care of the situation, so everyone could leave, as hotel staff would arrive in 5 minutes. Jinhan wanted to leave quickly and think about how to handle the situation. As he walked away, he heard Ryu Yoon-kyung shouting behind him that everything irritated her. There were so many crazy people in the world because everything could have been solved with a simple apology. Yet now there were tons of comments under the video. Myung-hyun was curious how things were going for director Ryu Jinhan, since the whole society was now turning against them. Protests were happening against the Hayeon group. Hayeon didn't know whether this would affect their project. She hoped Jinhan was okay. Judging by the fact that there had been no news from him since he returned home, the situation was very serious. They used to talk on the phone every day, but now he wasn't calling, and the girl understood him. Sitting in a cafe, Hayeon accidentally overheard 2 girls at the next table. They were discussing a video of Jinhan's sister. They said all rich people were the same, and that this probably wasn't the first time Ryu Yoon-kyung had slapped someone. It was horrible. How could someone treat people like that? Of course, having a lot of money didn't make them real human beings. Then the girl switched to talking about Ryu Jinhan, saying he had a dark past. Otherwise, why would he have broken off 2 engagements? Hayeon thought that those girls looked pure and innocent on the outside, but inside, they were rotten. Beautiful appearances hid true monsters. She knew Jinhan wasn't like what they said about him. Maybe people who seemed normal were actually monsters, and that might be true. Of course, the behavior of rich people was unpredictable. When someone has a lot of money, they can do anything because they can always buy their way out. Hayeon couldn't stand it anymore and asked the girls if they really knew director Ryu Jinhan so well. The girls asked why she was listening to their conversation and what difference it made to her. Hayeon replied that they were speaking very loudly so she could hear everything. She pointed out that the girls were wrong and shouldn't speak about things they clearly didn't know. The girl raised her voice and said they weren't friends, so why was she criticizing her? What right did she have? Why couldn't she say what she wanted? Did she belong to Ryu Jinhan's family? Or what was her connection? The stranger said she was very angry and wondered why she should feel guilty. The service at the place was disgusting, since no one cared that everyone was watching them. It was obvious they liked drama. The girls felt embarrassed and said Hayeon could leave now since they had apologized. But did they really think it was over? It wasn't. Myung-hyun pretended not to notice the girls and accidentally spilled cocktails on their clothes. She said she was very sorry, thinking there was a trash can in front of her. The stranger was shocked, calling Myung-hyun insane. To make up for her clumsiness, she offered to pay for dry cleaning, saying it happened because of her poor eyesight. A man approached them and asked who they were and why they were shouting in the restaurant. What did they want from his wife? The man came closer to Myung-hyun and asked why she was bothering his wife. The girl apologized, saying she hadn't seen where she was going because of her poor eyesight. The man demanded that she apologize to his wife. Myunghan said she had already apologized and wanted to know how much the dry cleaning would cost. But the stranger insisted it wasn't about the money. His wife was upset because of her. Myunghan assured them that the girl who overheard their unpleasant conversation was also upset. The man raised his hand to hit Myunghan, calling her a fearless woman and saying she would regret insulting his wife. Myunghan was scared that he might actually hit her, but she noticed someone grabbed his arm and tried to stop the attack. Myunghan saw that it was Uk Dae-hyun and was shocked, not understanding how he ended up in this restaurant. The man asked who he was and why he was interfering. Uk Dae-hyun asked what he was trying to do to his little girl. The couple realized they might be in trouble because this guy knew the girls well and would protect them to the end. Myunghan didn't understand who Uk Dae-hyun was calling his little girl or why he decided to protect her from that aggressive man. Was he really calling her that, even though just a few days ago she had caused him a huge scandal? Uk Dae-hyun had been watching them from the very beginning and could clearly see that this girl was in the wrong. The man asked if he was really sure about everything he saw and heard. Did he really have such sharp eyesight and hearing? The guy thought they were both on their women's side, so there was no need to blow the issue out of proportion. The man agreed with him since he didn't want to create trouble either, so he suggested his wife just leave. But the woman wasn't happy with that suggestion. She thought he was joking. The woman wanted the conflict to continue because she believed she was deliberately dirtied, and her own husband refused to support her. Myunghyun still couldn't calm down because she didn't understand if Uk Dae-hyun was really serious about helping her. The guy didn't understand why she was surprised. There was nothing strange about it. He simply didn't want a big aggressive man to hurt her, and anyone in his place would have done the same. Hayeon thought she should leave them alone, so she decided to go. But Myunghyun grabbed her hand and begged her not to leave her alone with him. Hayeon didn't know why her friend was shaking so much, since Uk Dae-hyun was behaving normally, just protecting her from the aggressive man. The girl asked Hayeon to stay with her because she had felt uncomfortable ever since arriving on the island. Myunghyun didn't even know that Uk Dae-hyun was in the hotel. She didn't want him following her and was avoiding any contact with him. If Myunghyun insisted that he leave, the guy had no problem with that. He didn't want to stay around her against her will. Myunghyun suddenly started crying. Hayeon tried to calm her down, even though she didn't understand what was going on. Hayeon tried to figure out what had happened between Myunghyun and Uk Dae-hyun, since her friend's reaction didn't make any sense. It was already deep night, and the office was almost empty. Jinhan was still working because problems wouldn't solve themselves. Secretary Kim entered the director's office and noticed he was working in complete silence. She couldn't finish her work while her boss was still working. She noticed that the director was completely different today and immediately realized something was bothering him. She reported that she had contacted the press office and wanted to talk to them, but Jinhan decided to leave things as they were, so there was no need to worry about it anymore. Secretary Kim was surprised by his decision because he never gave up and always solved problems quickly. Jinhan asked what was next on the schedule. Even though Yoo Yoon-young constantly got into trouble, he always pulled her out of it like an older brother. But why was it different this time? Secretary Kim said that actress Ko Young-ah sent an invitation to a movie premiere. The director asked her to tell the actress that he would definitely attend. The secretary understood, but she also wanted to ask what he wanted to eat, since she noticed he hadn't eaten all day. Jinhan told Secretary Kim she could go home, but she couldn't leave like that because the director still hadn't had dinner. He told her not to worry and promised he would finish his work and leave as well. Secretary Kim pointed out that he had just arrived and should rest instead. Jinhan told Secretary Kim that he wanted to take a short vacation. She was shocked. He never took breaks, even when she asked him to. This was the same director who never took annual leave, yet now, when the company had major problems, he calmly decided to take time off. She wanted to know why it was so urgent. Was he planning to go to Jeju again? Secretary Kim didn't see the point unless there were issues with the project. Jinhan said he had a meeting scheduled there. Secretary Kim checked her records, but there was no mention of any meeting in Jeju. The director had one request. This time, he wanted to stay in a house, because his rest should be comfortable. Was he planning to visit restaurants as well? The director didn't deny it. Eating good food was also part of relaxation for him. There were two possibilities. Either he needed to rest after the problems with Yoo Yoon-young, or he was simply exhausted. Starting tomorrow, the director would be away from work for a few days. Secretary Kim could leave early, and if anything urgent came up, she should notify him. A few days off, not just one, surprised Secretary Kim even more. She didn't even notice he was talking to her because she was lost in her thoughts. Jinhan understood her surprise, so he smiled and reminded her to take the documents since they had worked very well today. It was unusual for Jinhan to take a break, but he happily went to Jeju, not thinking about work and just enjoying his time off. After meeting Hayeon, they went to a restaurant. She asked if he had been there before, since she had never visited the place. The restaurant warmly welcomed its guests. The atmosphere was pleasant, and they expected a good rest and delicious food. Hayeon asked the shop owner what was tasty and healthy. Everything there was both delicious and good for health, which satisfied them. The owner said the octopus and abalone were very good. Hayeon decided to order octopus, abalone, sea cucumbers, and shellfish. Then she smiled and asked the owner to bring everything she had since she wanted to try it all that day. She asked Jinhan if he wanted to drink soju with her. He couldn't refuse such an offer since soju was a tasty drink. Jinhan liked how active and cheerful Hayeon was. It made him wonder if she enjoyed spending time with him, regardless of the place. Hayeon spoke kindly with the shop owner, treating her with respect and humanity. It seemed like she didn't care about status and saw everyone as equal. He thought this was exactly what his sister lacked. If she had even a bit of humanity, she wouldn't cause such problems. Hayeon was surprised when the shop owner told her she and her husband could sit at a table in the corner. Hayeon tried to explain that they weren't a couple, just friends. The woman thought they were married because they looked like a happy couple. In truth, it sounded really nice. The woman noted that the man was very handsome, and it was clear she liked him, which led her to that conclusion. The man noticed the shop owner talking to Hayeon for a long time and asked what she did for a living. It was time to get back to work. When the shop owner asked if they needed more food, they were surprised since they hadn't even received their first order yet. Then Hayeon realized the woman meant side dishes. Jinhan noticed that Hayeon knew the Jeju dialect well. Did he forget that Jeju was her brother's hometown? Hayeon and the woman spoke in the Jeju dialect, which Jinhan didn't understand, so he asked what they were talking about. She smiled and said he didn't need to know. It was their little secret. Though maybe he'd figure it out someday after learning the dialect. Hayeon wasn't only talented and beautiful, she was also clever, as she managed to intrigue Jinhan. Hayeon liked the spot the woman suggested and quickly went to sit there. But she didn't understand why Jinhan stayed behind. After a stressful business trip to Paris and dealing with Yoon Young's problems, the man felt drained. But now he finally felt calm and comfortable. Thanks to Hayeon, Jinhan realized he was starting to truly live, enjoying each day and appreciating the small things. Hayeon called him over, but Jinhan didn't move. Just being near her healed him both mentally and physically. Jinhan felt himself relaxing in Hayeon's presence, experiencing a deep sense of peace. The dish looked like a work of art. Fresh octopus sashimi looked so appetizing, and Hayeon asked if Jinhan liked it. He said he liked everything she offered, but she couldn't understand why he looked like he had just eaten something sour. Jinhan believed his face was always perfect. Hayeon could see he was busy, and if he kept exhausting himself like this, she would easily gain the upper hand. That's right. He signed a contract with Seed so that Hayeon could grow her business in the future. She thought Jinhan took her words as a joke, so she didn't pay much attention and just wanted him to enjoy the food. While he was eating the octopus sashimi, he wanted Hayeon to tell him something. She asked what exactly he wanted to know. He wanted to understand why she acted so confident in Jeju. It was simple. 4 years had passed since she met his sister-in-law, who was from Jeju. Jinhan wanted her to start with a secret. She didn't understand what he meant and told him he should ask proper questions. She seemed confident, but got stuck on the very first question. Still, he wanted to know that because he didn't like secrets. Maybe she didn't want to tell him what she discussed with that woman, but he would eventually find out everything.